Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto kills the villagers part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Sarutobi Hiruzen could feel himself aging as he sat here listening to another pointless council meeting that had nothing to do with himself or the various clans of Konohagakure that were present for the meeting. All of them were forced to listen to the current civilian plight that the citizens of Konohagakure thought they needed to voice to the leadership of the village. The person that was currently speaking was an overweight man with greasy black hair tied into a traditional ponytail. The man was dressed in a very expensive-looking kimono which was dripping with sweat, as he had to exert himself to remain on his feet as he talked. To be completely honest, Sarutobi wasn't even listening at this point. He had heard every possible complaint in the book, and he simply no longer cared as much as he used to. To keep his mind away from the mundane buzz in the council room, he busied his mind by thinking over how he should be enjoying his retirement by now. He was old and tired of this shit, but unfortunately he had no one that he trusted to take up the mantle at this point. Sure, there were several candidates, such as Danzo, who was always putting the village first and was constantly trying to make the village better, but he was a warhawk and only saw peace as being stronger than your opponents, so you could control them. Hatake Kakashi was a possibility in a few years, but he needed to learn to let go of the past and stop blaming things on himself. Tsunade, one of his students, had the similar issues as Kakashi along with a serious gambling and alcohol problem. Finally, there was Jiraiya, but Sarutobi didn't want to get into his issues, which in retrospect might have been caused in part by him. Sarutobi looked over the council room and thought about how bland the civilians were. Like a herd of sheep, they all seemed to be the same. They dressed alike, talked with that similar arrogant tone because they were rich, and to be honest, he didn't know any of their names. There were 30 representatives for the civilian part of the village, and most of them came from powerful merchant families, and yet there was nothing extraordinary about any of them, and to make matters worse, they seemed to be some of the most annoying people ever born. These people had no actual clout in the running in the village, but thought themselves important because they held so much power among the civilians. Thus people, in a vain attempt to gain more power, had appointed themselves the Civilian Council of Konohagakure. It was pathetic really, but for some kami-forsaken reason the rest of the civilians in the village seemed to listen to them, and even backed the idea of a civilian council, even going so far as to petition to make it part of the actual village council. The Shinobi Council, however, was a different story, made up of all the clan heads of Konohagakure, the Aburame, Akimichi, Hyuga, Inuzuka, Nara, Uchiha, Yamanaka, and of course his own, the Sarutobi clan. They made an interesting group of people that stood out in any crowd. Each had their own characteristic and were proud to be different. There was also places at the table for the Senju, Namikes, and Uzumaki clans. Unfortunately, these seats were vacant as the only remaining Senju was Tsunade, and the other two clans were believed to be gone, but the seats were kept as a form of ceremony and respect to the Yondaime and the Uzumaki clan respectively. The last part of the council was the village elders and Hokage's advisors, Hamura, Koharu, and Danzo, his old teammates and former best friends. Over the years they had become more and more distant until it got to the point they hardly ever said more than a few words to each other unless it was business. Danzo was against him at every turn in the council, and Hiruzen felt a pang of regret for that. They used to be the best of friends, but now it was like they were little more than strangers that shared a past. Hiruzen knew that the distance started the minute he had been chosen to be the next Hokage, but at the time didn't know how much damage the title would do to their friendship. It was while he was reminiscing about his old friends and the different parts of the council that he noticed for the first time that all of the civilian council seemed nervous. In fact, they seemed beyond nervous, and they were borderlining on anxious to be anywhere but where they were. As he observed them, he started picking up all the little things that had eluded earlier in his boredom. The way that some of them kept looking from the clock to him, the nervous whispers between 2 or 3 group members, and the fact that they all seemed to be sweating. His instincts were screaming at him, and he tried to figure out why. He knew something was wrong, terribly wrong, but couldn't put a finger on why. Then it hit him, like a punch from the taijutsu expert of the village, my guy. How could he be so stupid? The air in the room began to fill with killing intent as Hiruzen Sarutobi became truly and utterly angry. With his hat covering his eyes, he began to stand as the civilian spokesperson fell silent. What have you done? His voice was barely above a whisper, yet in the silence that had settled in the room, it might as well have been a scream. He watched as his simple question caused most of the civilian council to flinch and become very nervous, while they all tried their best to avoid eye contact with the enraged Hokage. The room was completely silent, nobody wanting to be the first to break and risk the wrath of the man that could, without a doubt, kill all of them with minimal effort, having proven that fact in the 3 great shinobi wars. Surprisingly, it was a member of the so-called civilian council that broke the silence. He looked like any other male middle-aged civilian. He had brown hair, brown eyes, and dressed in a simple, yet expensive, gray kimono. He stood up slowly, as if he was scared of making any sudden movements causing the Hokage's rage to be unleashed upon him. The eyes of the room moved from the still enraged Sarutobi to him as he addressed the Hokage. "What do you mean, Hokage-sama?" She stuttered out while shaking like a leaf, having had the focused killing intent of the Hokage set upon her. Hiruzen laughed, and said in a voice that held a sharp edge, "Did you honestly think I wouldn't notice? Did you honestly think I wouldn't realize something was going on? I may be getting old, but I am far from senile. So why not just tell me what you have done?" During his speech, Hiruzen had gone from a soft whisper to shouting at the collection of wealthy civilian. The very walls seemed to be shaking at the unbridled rage in his voice. Slowly he moved so he stood in front of his desk, not raising his head to look at the terrified men and women in their seats, his eyes hidden in the shadows of his Hokage hat. Hamura, Koharu, and Danzo all looked at their old friend in both fear and surprise. It had been many years since they had seen Hiruzen with such a commanding presence. In fact, the last time he had been this commanding was during the Third Great Shinobi War. Finally, after a few more minutes' silence, Koharu spoke. "Hiruzen, what's wrong?" It was at this point that Sarutobi finally lifted his head so that all present could see his eyes. They were not the soft, caring eyes of the old man that so many had come to know. They were as hard as steel, the pupils of his eyes black pits of death and rage. These were the eyes of someone that had seen battle, that had witnessed the lives of countless people end, both friend and foe. These were the eyes of the god of shinobi, the eyes of the professor, one of the most feared ninja to ever walk the elemental nations. At this point in time, his eyes were fixed firmly on the members of the civilian council. Many on the civilians looked away, afraid to look into the eyes that felt like they were staring into their very souls looking for misdeeds. His voice as cold as ice, Sarutobi spoke. "Why are we here? Why are any of us here? These aren't shinobi matters or matters that are urgent in any way, shape, or form. So far all we've heard is nothing but civilian affairs that could have waited until the next official council meeting where civilians could voice their grievances. So why are we here? I was told that there was an important matter that must be discussed, and yet we have been here for 4 hours and all you have talked about is basic information of no real importance. So I ask you, why are we here?" Nobody dared to speak as even the clan heads were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Nobody moved in the group of civilians due to the gaze of the Hokage still pinning them in place. But the tension in the room was becoming more and more intense with every passing minute as the civilians got more and more nervous at the gaze and killing intent that the Hokage pushed upon them. It was then that he asked a question that had a unique effect on the room. "What is the date?" Those 4 words froze all those in the room, the civilians in fear and the shinobi in sudden realization as the topic of conversation became clear. Everything was quiet. Then the killing intent in the room seemed to increase tenfold. All the shinobi clan heads and, surprisingly, the 3 elders added their own killing intent to the Hokage's and focused it at the civilian council. Suddenly, not being able to stand the killing intent in the room any longer, one of the civilians stood from her seat to address the gathered people, a woman in her late 20s, with pink hair, which is a common trait among the Haruno merchant family, and an expensive-looking white kimono with the image of a sakura tree in bloom. The fear she felt at the combined killing intent making her voice come out high and shaky. "We did what you were afraid to do. The Kyubi is dead, all the people it killed that night have been avenged and the garbage that has plagued our streets has finally been done away with." It was then that an extremely pissed Inuzuka-tsum shot to her feet, practical frothing at the mouth, and shouted back. "You are fools and are so blinded by your hate that you actually believe that a 6-year-old boy is the Kyubi. Did it ever occur to any of you that if what you say was true, then we'd probably all be dead by now due to the Kyubi flattening the village?" The clan heads nodded in agreement with Tsum's logic and continued to stare down the civilian council. Despite what many would believe, many of the shinobi in Konohagakure didn't hold a grudge against the boy. Some did, but they were mostly teenagers that lost everything in the attack 6 years ago. Even the ninja that did hate Naruto never acted beyond glares and harsh words. Every now and then a ninja would join in with the civilians if there was a mob, but those ninja that did participate never stayed ninja long after Sarutobi Hiruzen found out. If they didn't drop out of the shinobi program, they always seemed to be killed in action while on a mission. Before anything else could happen, the Hokage decided he had wasted enough time on the civilians and moved to the door of the chamber. "I don't have time for this. I need to try and stop whatever is happening before it's too late." That was all it took to snap the attention of the people in the room as the clan heads and elders all quickly moved to the doors. But before the Hokage pushed the doors open, he paused. Looking back at the members of the so-called civilian council, he left them with one more thing to think about before he left to stop whatever they had planned to do to Naruto. "If anything has happened to Naruto, anything at all, I will come back here and kill every single one of you. Boo. Make sure none of these worms leave this room before I come back. 5 animal masked ninja appeared in the room, positioning themselves in such a way that any and all possible exits were blocked off. With that, he pushed the doors open, only to stop dead at the sound that assaulted his ears. A scream unlike anything anyone in the room had ever heard echoed around the chamber. Hiruzen absently made a mental note that someone must have applied a silencing seal to the door and windows while they were in the room. It was the only way to explain why none of them had heard the bone-chilling scream that seemed to echo across the entire village. Hiruzen rushed out of the room, flanked by the clan heads and the village elders, intent on ending whatever the villagers were doing. They managed to arrive quickly, and when they got there it appeared the villagers were celebrating around a bonfire. But locating the source of the scream, Hiruzen's stomach dropped as he realized that it was coming from the fire. Hiruzen quickly ran through a series of hand seals before he called out his jutsu. Water style, liquid bullet. The water bullet hit the flames and doused them with ease. The Hokage then rushed to the pile of smoking wood to see Naruto without any skin on his form. Muscle was showing all over his body, and he appeared to be charred. The Hokage turned to the clan heads and said in a grim tone, barely restraining his rage and killing intent. Kill them all. I don't want survivors. Any person that would do this has no humanity. The clan heads nodded and smirked as they turned on the civilian crowd that was watching them. The crowd stood no chance against the leaders on the various clans of the Leaf Village. As blood began to spill, Hiruzen stood up and body flickered to the hospital. He appeared right outside the hospital doors and quickly walked in holding Naruto in his arms bridal style. I need a stretcher and several doctors now. The nurses looked at him before they moved into action to do as their pissed-off Hokage had ordered. Flashback hours earlier. Naruto sat on his bed in his apartment, staring at the floor blankly. Today was his 6th birthday, and, like all his previous birthdays, he was spending it completely alone. He had no friends or family to spend what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life with, and it caused knots to form in his stomach. His apartment was made up of just 2 rooms, the main room, which had his bed, a table and a small kitchen which he didn't know how to use. The once white wallpaper that covered the walls of the room was peeling off due to age and neglect. Cracks covered most of the walls in the room where villagers either threw Naruto against the wall or broke it themselves using whatever they had on hand, and the carpet was covered in reddish-brown stains from all the times the villagers had broken in and beaten him to a bloody pulp. There was even places where the carpet had been torn up and showed the subfloor underneath. There was one window that looked out over the street, but it had several cracks and missing pieces of glass from where people had thrown rocks into his room. The only other room was what the old man said was supposed to be his bathroom. It did have all the basic things that one would find in a bathroom: a toilet, a sink, it even had a shower. The problem, however, was that he never had any hot water, so whenever he took one it hurt because it was so cold. He also learned that before he moved in, someone, after hearing that he was moving in, had disconnected the water pipe that went to the toilet and sink. This meant that he needed to put water in the holding tank himself when he wanted to flush the toilet. The problem with that, however, was that he could barely reach the top of the toilet. This room also was not immune to the rage of the villagers, as the mirror above the sink had cracks all over it from a villager punching it. The sink had a chunk missing from a villager hitting it with what Naruto assumed would be a pipe or bat. Naruto looked around his small apartment, and even with the issues he felt he was lucky the old man could get it for him. Sure, it was small, but it's not like he had much stuff anyway, and the stuff he did have was old and, in most cases, moldy, and it was far better than when he was living on the streets. The apartment at least gave him protection from some of the harsher elements that Mother Nature could dish out, as well as provide a place to call home. 2 years ago, on his 4th birthday, the orphanage had told him that they didn't have room for him anymore and threw him out, literally. One of the care workers had thrown him out by the scruff of his neck right into a pile of rotten food. The first few weeks had been hard as he had no food or place to sleep, but he learned rather quickly which bins would have food and which alleys would have boxes that he could sleep in. He even learned to avoid people at night, as if they saw him they would take away whatever he had managed to scrounge up or would stomp on the boxes he was going to sleep in. But to the villagers that wasn't enough, and that's when the beatings had started. Luckily, the old man had found him. He didn't trust him at first. It wasn't the first time someone had tricked him into trusting them, but over time his weariness of the kind old man in the strange clothes eased away. Sarutobi had been careful when he saw him, shocked as well. But after getting over it, he took a shivering Naruto to the hospital and, after getting him looked at, brought him to the apartment in which Naruto now lived. His distrust of people stemmed from one instance that he remembered. One time a nice old lady had invited him into her house to eat when she found him looking through her garbage bins for food. The moment he was inside her door, she locked the door and proceeded to beat him with her walking stick, screaming and yelling at him something about how he had killed her only son. Only after about 10 minutes of cowering on the ground as she beat him, was Naruto finally able to get away from her by jumping through a window. He received several large gashes from that incident and learned to avoid the kindness of others, or at least to be wary of it. It was also the first time he noticed that he healed very fast. When he had gotten far enough away, he had stopped and looked at his arms, which were filled with shards of broken glass from the window he had leapt through in his desperation to get away. Then, right in front of his eyes, the glass was pushed out of his skin and the wounds started to heal. He didn't know what to think, but just assumed that it was the same for everyone and, putting it to the back of his mind, didn't think about it again. That was about a year ago, and since then he never left the apartment, at least not willingly. All his food was brought to him, so he never needed to. Not that it stopped the villagers. The old man would visit him every now and then, but he hadn't had time as of late. Naruto didn't know what he actually did, but he knew it was important as he had seen several of the villagers give him respect. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't even realize that he had started singing to himself, his small, weak voice barely above a whisper. Happy birthday to me, happy birthday to me, happy birthday Naruto, happy birthday to me, happy birthday dear Naruto, happy birthday to me. By the end of the song, Naruto could feel the tears falling down his cheeks, but he still didn't make another sound. He just stared off into empty space, twin lines of water falling freely from his eyes. The tears washing away the grin on his face, showing the clear lines on his face where the tears had fallen. Why did he have to be alone? Why did the villagers hate him? Why did they hurt him? Why did no one love him? Why? As he asked himself these questions again and again out loud, Naruto barely even registered he had started to punch the wall next to his bed, his small hands bleeding as the skin split and the wall cracked, only for the wound to heal moments later. The sadness finally became too unbearable, and Naruto threw himself on his bed and sobbed into the bare mattress, as the villagers had taken the sheets and pillows the last time they had attacked him. Meanwhile, Anbu Captain Hatake Kakashi was looking through the window from his perch on the building across the street from the small boy's apartment. He watched a 6-year-old boy sing to himself as he cried, and punch a wall over and over again until his hand broke. His heart ached at the sight, and he wanted desperately to help the boy more than he had. No one should have to go through what that boy had, and defiantly not as young as Naruto. Kakashi had been the boy's guard ever since the Hokage had found him in a back alley. Naruto had been found half frozen from the cold and little more than skin and bones. It had been a miracle he was alive when the Hokage found him. When he had first seen the boy in the hospital, the silver-haired Jonin thought he was actually dead, and, after spending about an hour just staring at his weak form, the Hokage had called him straight to his office and told him what had happened. In fact, the doctor said that any normal child would have succumbed to starvation at the point in which Naruto had been found. Originally, he had wanted to adopt him, but the civilians had argued that because Kakashi was an Anbu captain, his job was far more important to the village than looking after one child. The ninja council had refused his request, as they felt that the civilians had a point. They believed that they couldn't show Naruto any sort of favoritism due to the fact that he was supposed to be one of the hundreds of orphans from the Kyuubi incident. Of course, the real reason was not to emphasize the fact that he is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, which was supposed to be an S-class secret. So instead he had volunteered to be the boy's bodyguard, a job the Hokage had agreed to but had to set certain rules. The boy was still a civilian after all, so he couldn't officially be given a guard. So they had come up with a solution. Kakashi spent almost all his spare time watching the boy. If he wasn't on a mission, then he was on the roof across from Naruto's apartment. This meant he could stop anyone that tried going after the boy while he was here. The only problem with this was that he still needed to go on missions so nobody would realize that the boy actually had protection and not just a passing Anbu to help him. Kakashi knew who the boy's parents were. Really, you would need to be completely blind not to. He had his mother's last name and hyperactive nature for a start, and as for his father, well, just look at him. He was a carbon copy of the fourth Hokage. The only difference between the two was the malnourished frame and whisker marks on his cheeks. So caught up in his thoughts, Kakashi didn't notice the black-clad figure behind him, and by the time he did, it was too late. Kakashi felt a sharp pain in the back of his head, and then nothing. After an hour or so of crying, Naruto had finally fallen asleep, his dreams full of faceless people, villagers. There was one thing they all had in common: they hurt him, they always hurt him. Why did they always hurt him? His dreams were always the same, at least when he could get to sleep. It was very rare for Naruto to sleep more than an hour at a time, in part due to the paranoia and fear that dominated his life. He didn't know why. He just didn't seem to really need it. His body was just full of energy, like it was constantly being pumped full of energy from some unknown source. He knew it was strange due to his time in the orphanage. The other kids just seemed to be able to go to sleep whenever they felt like it, but Naruto always felt like he was ready to go. But on the rare occasion when he did manage to get to sleep, it was always the same. He would always have nightmares. Some of them, like the one he was having now, were of all the times he was beaten by the villagers. Other kinds of nightmares he had were of strange creatures, odd things that one would assume someone in a mental institution would dream up. Some of them didn't even seem to have a shape, nothing more than shades in the shadows of his dreams. Hiding at the edge of his mind, lurking in the shadows waiting watching. The thing that scared him the most though was when he had a dream about it. He didn't know why, but it was always the clearest thing in his nightmares, and it was the one thing that was always there. Whenever he slept, no matter what he was dreaming, it would always make an appearance. A large fox, bigger than any building he had seen in Konoha, bigger even than the Hokage monument. With its blood-red fur and teeth larger than a full-grown man, each a giant spike that could easily pierce metal, it was the most frightening thing he had ever seen. But the most terrifying thing about it was the eyes. Large red pools of moving liquid fire ringed in black, with a black vertical slit down the middle. It was like the two colors were fighting for dominance, a never-ending battle between light and dark. It was the eyes that haunted Naruto in his waking hours. They held no real emotion. No malice, no happiness, nothing, just a primal instinct, primal need, yet they shone with an odd intellect. The intellect of age, of things long past. It was like the fox was both a raging beast, yet it held an intelligence as vast as the world. Naruto was woken when he heard loud banging at his door. Instantly he knew what was going on. It happened all the time. Sitting up in his bed, he just stared at the door, waiting, listening to the door strain against its assaultus. He knew from experience that there was no point in hiding, they always found him. He knew he couldn't run as they would track him down, and he really couldn't outrun some of the adult in the crowd. It didn't take them long to get through the door, as it had taken abuse before and was already partially broken. When they did, Naruto saw a large number of people crowded in the corridor outside his room. He recognized some of them from previous mobs: the middle-aged fat man that had no hair, the old man with the long white beard and one eye. Then Naruto's eyes landed on one of the most prevalent figures in these mobs, the woman with the pink hair. She was a regular when it came to his mobs. Hell, most the time she was the leader. With her pink hair and green eyes, she normally stood out in a crowd. She wore an elegant red dress with a strange white pattern and looked like she was going out for a night on the town, not leading a mob to beat a small boy. They just stood there in the doorway for a moment. The pink-haired lady had a smug look on her face, just staring at him. "Take this piece of filth outside." Her voice was cold, and without sparing him a second glance, turned around and went to wait outside. With those 3 words she had broken the floodgates. The men lurched forward and roughly grabbed the 6-year-old. Naruto could smell the alcohol on their breath, which was bad. It was always worse when they were drunk. After they dragged him outside, Naruto saw more people. This was very bad, as there had never been this many people before. For the next half hour the mob proceeded to beat, stab, and bludgeon the small boy until it seemed there was nothing left to hurt. Even through the pain, Naruto found himself making mental notes of what was happening. He was stabbed more times than he could count, but that wasn't saying much considering he was never taught past 10. He was bludgeoned with lead pipes, run through with farm equipment, kicked, punched, and slashed. Throughout the whole experience, Naruto never made a sound, not even to scream. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Even now he had his pride, and he wouldn't let them take that away. This just seemed to make them angrier, but as soon as they stopped he started to heal, leaving nothing more than faint silvery scars on his skin. Unfortunately, after he was healed the mob would begin again. He didn't know how long they beat him. It could have been hours or minutes for all he knew. Every time Naruto was completely broken they would stop, wait a few minutes for him to heal, and then start again, repeating the torture over and over again. Eventually the pink-haired woman came back into view, though it took him a few minutes to identify her because his eyes had needed to regrow after they were stabbed and a rusted spoon was used to pull them out for the 5th time that night. Not that Naruto knew they were doing this. As far as he knew, he had just lost consciousness for a few minutes. Tie him to the post. Naruto was hurled up and dragged to a post someone had stuck into the ground, a pile of wood lying around the base. Naruto could smell accelerant in the air, and as they approached the post he realized that all the wood was soaked in it. Now, Naruto might be young and uneducated, but even he could see what was going to happen here. If he could have put up a fight as they tied him to the post, he would have, but he was still weak and was currently healing from the last round of the beatings. When he was secured to the post with ninja wire, the mob moved back and 5 people clad in black hoods, stopping anyone from seeing their faces, stepped out of the crowd and stood there, surrounding the unlit pile of wood. When the crowd had quieted down, the pink-haired woman stepped forward and stared at him with an empty expression on her face. After a minute of looking into his eyes she smirked, her eyes becoming filled with sick glee, and turned to address the crowd. Tonight, we right the wrongs that have been done to us. Tonight, we take our revenge on this creature." At this point, she threw her right arm out towards Naruto. The crowd began to cheer as her words got more and more heated. Someone in the crowd got so worked up by this that they threw an empty sake bottle at the beaten boy. After waiting for the crowd to settle down again, she continued where she had left off. 6 years ago, the Kyuubi attacked this village, destroyed our homes and killed our families. Tonight we take our revenge. This thing has the Kyuubi inside of it, therefore it is the Kyuubi. The Hokage may be fooled by its facade, but we are not. We see it for what it truly is, and tonight we finish what the Yondaime could not. Tonight, we kill the Kyuubi no Kitsune. At the end of her tirade, she turned to look at the boy, her face full of arrogance, self-importance, and joy. Naruto was shocked. He didn't understand. He was the Kyuubi? That was impossible, wasn't it? His thoughts flashed to his nightmares, to a giant red fox. What if it was true? What if he really was the Kyuubi? It made sense. He realized the glares, the beatings, the hate. It was all because he was the Kyuubi. But if he was the Kyuubi, why didn't he remember? If he had killed all those people, he would remember, wouldn't he? All these thoughts and more passed through Naruto's head, but before he had time to think, the pink-haired lady raised her hands and looked at each of the 5 people around the fire. "Light it up." With that, the 5 hooded figures started to make hand seals. When they finished, 5 voices could be heard calling out. Fire style, Grand Fire Ball Jutsu. 5 balls of fire simultaneously struck the wood, and lit it instantly due to the accelerant. It didn't take long for the heat to become too much for Naruto. He tried not to scream, to keep to his personal vow of silence, but he just couldn't. The pain was too much for him to bear, and with one deep breath he let it out. All the years of pain that these people caused him, all the things they had done, he just let it all out. He screamed so loudly that it actually made them stop cheering for a moment, but then the moment passed, and they started again. Soon he started to feel his skin bubble, melting off his body. It was indescribable. He was in so much pain as the skin slid off his body. Then he noticed, in his pain-fogged mind, that he was healing while he was burning. The thing that had kept him alive was at work trying to heal him as fast as his body burned. For 3 hours he screamed as the torture continued, but to him it seemed like a lifetime of burning, writhing in agony, nothing but him, the flames, and the sound of laughter from the crowd that enjoyed his pain. Eventually he felt the fire stop, but that just caused a new pain to arrive. He felt cold, very cold. He had become so used to the heat of the fire that he couldn't stop shivering, and the more he shivered only caused him more pain as the nerves screamed at him to stop moving. The last thing he saw before he was finally able to slip into the abyss that was his mind was the old man, looking down on him with a look of absolute horror and rage on his face. When Naruto next woke, he didn't know where he was, and frankly he didn't care. There was no more pain. He was numb, as though he had been sitting out in the cold too long. He felt nothing. He started to notice his surroundings, though his head was still a little foggy. Wherever he was, it was huge, some kind of underground cavern, solid stone walls all around him and a barely visible stone roof. To one side he noticed a giant gate in the place of a wall, but that wasn't what was weird about it. The strange thing was that it seemed to be held shut with nothing more than a piece of paper. Naruto also noticed that there were pipes running along the walls coming from the cage. As he stood up, he realized that he was knee-deep in some kind of strange water, which seemed to be flowing out from the cage. It took him a moment before he recognized that it wasn't water at all, it was blood. Yet Naruto still didn't care, as he'd seen blood many times in his life and held no fear of it, especially since he dreamed of becoming a ninja and knew the harsh reality of his chosen career path. It was then that he heard it, a low rumbling sound off in the distance. At first he thought it was thunder, but then remembered he was underground, or what he thought was underground. Whatever it was getting louder. Turning towards the gate, he grasped what he was hearing. Growling, very feral growling. How did he figure that out? Easy, by looking at the giant red fox on the other side of the gate. Naruto stared up into its face, into its fire-like eyes, the eyes that had haunted his nightmares for as long as he could remember. For the first time they didn't scare him, he felt empty as shell-numb. The two just stared at each other for what felt like hours, until finally. Ha 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 ha. It was strange to see a fox laugh. Its voice was so deep he could feel the vibrations all around him. I have lived for thousands of years, seen civilizations rise and fall, but I have never known a human, a child no less, that could look me in the eye without fear. Maybe you won't be such a bad host after all. For you must be either as foolish or as brave as they come. Ha 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 ha. Naruto just continued to look at the giant beast before him with a blank expression on his 6-year-old face, showing no sign that he had even heard or cared about the fox's words. So it's true. You being here must mean the things the pink-haired lady said were true. Though I can't tell where we are, it does seem oddly familiar. His words made the fox's laughter stop instantly, a look of mild surprise crossing its face. The boy's voice just sounded wrong, it held no emotion, no feeling. It actually sent a shiver up the cubie's spine to hear such an empty tone in a child's voice. It was then the fox took a good look at the boy. Naruto had on a plain white t-shirt that looked like it had come right out of the trash, a pair of black shorts with too many holes in them to be considered usable. His spiky blonde hair going in all directions, and 3 whiskers on each cheek that gave him an innocent but feral look, not that it had helped him with the villagers. But what really caught its attention were his eyes. His large blue eyes that were normally full of life no matter what life threw at him, eyes that could brighten up the room just by being there, were now dead. They held no light in them, no shine of happiness, no flash of anger, nothing. They lacked the spark that one would see in the eyes of the living. Now they were like the eyes of an old man that had seen too much and had given up, waiting for death to come and take him away. The Kyuubi didn't know what to think of this. It had seen eyes like that before, but only in people that had lived their lives and had endured great loss. Kyuubi had never seen it outside of that situation, especially not in the eyes of a 6-year-old boy. We are in your mindscape, a place in your subconscious mind. At the moment we are using it as you could say a bridge of sorts, in order for us to communicate. What you see around you is a representation of both our minds. Naruto thought about that for a moment, seeming to be getting his thoughts in order, as he took his time looking around him. I see, I'm guessing the blood is you, which means that my mind is a sewer or a boiler due to the pipes running through it. Interesting. That made the fox laugh again. It was starting to actually like this kid. Naruto just stared at the giant fox in front of him, his face completely devoid of any emotions as he met the beast's burning gaze without fear. Why? The fox just looked down at the boy in front of it with an amused gleam in its eyes. It would amuse me, what other reason do I need? Let's face it, you need all the help you can get. You're weak, it's pathetic really. I'm 6, how the hell am I supposed to be powerful at this age? Whatever, in your circumstance you need as much power as you can get to protect yourself. So you'll just give me a new bloodline with no strings attached? The fox looked thoughtful for a moment before its eyes took on a slight glimmer. Well, I guess you'll just have to owe me one, won't you? The fox paused here, to see how Naruto would react. All it got was a blank look for several minutes before. That's it. That's it. Naruto thought about it for a moment then agreed, what harm could it do? Okay. With that the Kyuubi sent as much of its chakra through the bars of its cage as the seal would allow. Slowly it made its way towards Naruto, who stood there, staring into the fox's eyes, seeming to ignore the bubbling red chakra as it slowly started to climb up his small legs, and after a moment covered his entire body. After a few minutes it started to soak into his body until nothing was left. It's done. So what can I do? You can be anything. Naruto looked at the fox for a moment. Isn't that just crap parents tell their kids to make them feel better? The fox looked at the boy, trying to tell if he was serious, a large sweat drop appearing at the back of its head. Well, yes it is, but in his case it's literal. I gave you the ability to shape-shift, its only limitations are your imagination and size. The bigger or smaller the thing you change into, the more chakra it will take. Naruto thought about that for a moment. It did sound useful to be able to change into practically anything. How does it work? It's simple enough, just picture the form you want to change into in your mind, and channel chakra through your body. I can be anything? Pretty much. Oh, I should probably warn you that if you're not careful you could lose control of the form, and go on a killing spree, slaughtering everything in sight. Sounds fun, right? I personally hope that happens at least a few times. Naruto just stared at the fox for a moment. It made sense, and he didn't really care one way or the other anymore. That seems like a fair enough trade-off. The fox just stared at the boy in front of it for a long moment, before bursting out in laughter. Ha 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 ha, they really did break you, didn't they, ha? Kami, this is the most fun I've had in centuries, ha ha ha. I mean, I thought the Romans and the Mongolians were brutal, but this village just topped them. Naruto just stood there, staring at the fox as it continued to laugh. When the Kyuubi calmed down enough to stop laughing it turned back to the boy. Thanks for that, Woo, I needed it. Anyway, I think it's time for you to wake up, see you later, kid. Before Naruto could reply he felt dizzy, and fell back into the water. When he opened his eyes, he could see the old man leaning over him. Sarutobi Hiruzen had been sitting at Naruto's bedside for 3 days straight. Luckily, his old friends had stepped up to run the village for a few days. He had been skeptical at first of letting Danzo anywhere near his office, but it turns out he wasn't against him as much as he had thought. He had been, in his own words, trying to bring back his will of fire. It seems that he had taken it onto himself to try and challenge him, hoping that by going against what he believed in it would force him to regain the fire that he lost at the end of the Third Great War. Sarutobi had been so happy when he heard that he actually hugged the old cripple. Danzo still didn't agree with his ideals, but he did admit that he respected them, even if he couldn't believe in them himself. Hamura and Koharu apparently knew about this from the start, but not having the heart to do the same, started to distance themselves from him, not being able to see him that way. When the three had seen the look in his eyes at the meeting, they had seen their friend again, the man that had lived through wars and countless battles. They had come to him the same night of the incident, as it was now being called, and told him everything. Since then they had been handling everything while he waited for the boy in front of him to wake up. They had caught most people from that night, at least the ones that were left after he let the clan leaders take the crowd down, but some had still gotten away. They had stopped 4 of the 5 ninja that had been involved, and they had been nothing more than a few no-name chunin that had lost their families in the Kyuubi's attack 6 years ago. The rest that they had caught were just civilians, mostly drunk, and had all been sent to Ibiki and Enko and Tianai. 3 days, and there was still no response from Naruto, not a twitch or a groan, nothing. He was completely and utterly dead to the world. If it wasn't for the heart monitor, Hiruzen would have thought Naruto a corpse. Hiruzen heard the door to the room sliding open and turned to see Hatake Kakashi entering the room. Kakashi had been in a deep depression ever since the incident. He wasn't wearing his Umbu uniform anymore, only his normal attire of a black bodysuit, his mask, his flak jacket, and his left eye covered by his forehead protector. It was all his fault. If he had been paying attention, this wouldn't have happened, and to have been jumped by some no-name chunin. If nothing else, this whole experience had shown him that he had become arrogant, relying on the Sharingan and letting his other skills fade, which had left him vulnerable, and now Naruto was the one to pay the price. By the time he had come to, it was too late. The damage was done. He had woken up just in time to see the Hokage go berserk, slaughtering the many people gathered around the burning 6-year-old. He was found a few minutes later on the same roof he had been sitting watching over Naruto, with his hands tied in ninja wire, by one of the ANBU that had been gathering up the few villagers that had gotten away. After discovering what had happened, and a quick talk with the Hokage, he had come to the memorial stone, and just stood there, staring at the names of his old teammate and sensei for 3 days. "I'm so sorry, Minato-sensei, Renabito, I've failed again," he whispered to the air. He decided that it was time to see if Naruto was awake. Turning his back to the stone, he took off towards the hospital. The first thing Sarutobi thought when he saw Kakashi was that he looked even more tired than he did. The bags under his visible eye only seemed to emphasize this fact. His clothes were a mess, and his hair, which would usually be sticking up, was flat against his head. His shoulders were slumped towards the ground. He slowly walked into the room, and stood next to the Hokage, looking at the boy lying in the bed. "I don't blame you, Kakashi, it wasn't your fault. They got around all of us and you couldn't have known other ninja were going to come for the boy." The silver-haired ninja didn't react to the Hokage's words. He just stood there, staring at Naruto. Eventually he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I appreciate that, Hokage-sama, but it was my fault. I let my guard down. I became complacent, and he paid for it. I will never be able to make this up to him." Sarutobi was afraid this would happen. "Kakashi, they tricked us all, including me. At least we don't have to deal with those damn fools anymore." It was true. While Naruto had been in surgery, Sarutobi had gone back to the council room, and repeated the actions of the clan heads when they had found Naruto. The only difference being that he killed them all. Since then not a single civilian had approached the Hokage as word had spread of the massacre, and the civilian part of the village was in no rush to organize a new group of advocates to go to the village council. Kakashi still didn't move his eyes from Naruto's form. "I guess." Before another word could be said between the two of them, one of the machines connected to Naruto started beeping rapidly. Startled, Sarutobi shot to his feet, and leaned over while Kakashi ran into the hall shouting for a doctor. "Naruto! Naruto, can you hear me? Naruto!" Slowly, the young boy's eyes started to open. When they did, Sarutobi's, Kakashi's, and the just arriving doctor's eyes all widened in a mixture of horror and shock, all three of them taking a step back, not even realizing it. They were the eyes of a corpse, lifeless, without the slightest hint of emotion in his once bright blue eyes. They were still the same shade of blue, but something was just missing. "Dear Kami, Naruto, what have they done to you?" whispered Sarutobi under his breath. Getting over his shock, the doctor quickly made his way over to the boy's bedside and, after taking a moment to check the many different machines that he was hooked up to, shone a small light in his eyes to test their reaction, trying to figure out what was wrong with them. When that was done, he stepped back, shook his head, and then turned to the other two men in the room. "He's conscious, and there's nothing physically wrong with his eyes. I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do at this point seeing as he is at full health." With that he left, leaving the men in the room with the poor boy. A few minutes later, Naruto started to whisper something. It was so quiet that the two shinobi in the room had to lean in towards the boy to hear him. "Why didn't you just let me die? Why?" Those words broke both men's hearts. To hear such words coming from a 6-year-old boy was just wrong. Not able to stand it anymore, Kakashi left the room without a word, though the old Hokage could clearly hear the sound of something being thrown against a wall out in the corridor. Probably going back to the memorial stone, thought Sarutobi. It was a week later before Naruto was discharged from the hospital. He didn't say a word to anyone, not even the Hokage after that first sentence, just stared off into empty space. It worried Sarutobi greatly. There was also the fact that he hadn't slept at all for a week straight, and didn't show any signs of changing anytime soon. Kakashi hadn't come back. As Sarutobi led him to his apartment, Naruto absently noticed that the people were still glaring at him whenever the old man wasn't looking. He was covered from head to toe in bandages again, although there was now an opening for his mouth and eyes. The old man had found him some basic clothes to wear on the way. Ironically, they were the same clothes he had when in his mindscape talking to Kyuubi, only new. Sarutobi had tried to talk to him about the Kyuubi several times, but Naruto would just stare off into space, not saying a word. When they got to the apartment, the old Hokage stayed with him for an hour or so, making sure the boy was okay. Naruto just went about his business as if Sarutobi wasn't even there. Moving around the room, picking up the things that had been knocked over when the villagers had dragged him out, throwing away what they had broken and trying to fix what was salvageable. At least one good thing came out of this, thought the Hokage. He finally had the drive and complete power to do anything he wanted to help Naruto. Meaning, starting tomorrow night, Naruto would get a full Umbu-guard watching over him 24/7. He had asked Kakashi to be the team leader, but the man had refused, saying that he couldn't look after him anymore when he had let him down and had caused him so much pain. Eventually, Sarutobi had to go back to work. He had been away for too long as it was, so saying goodbye to the unresponsive boy, he left the apartment, shaking his head at the thought of what had happened to the boy. As the day turned to night, you could find Naruto in the same spot as the night when they had come for him, just sitting on his mattress staring into an empty corner of the room. He didn't know how long he had been sitting there, and he didn't care. It was at this point that his door opened. He hadn't locked it, he didn't see any point, it never stopped them before, and it wouldn't now. He just kept staring at the wall. After a few minutes of nothing happening, he slowly turned his head toward the door, still showing no interest at what was going on around him. Stood in the doorway, an insane grin stretching across her face, was the pink-haired lady. It seemed that she was one of the few that gotten away from the old man. For a few more minutes he just sat there, staring into her wide, deranged eyes. Then he saw the knife in her hand. It looked like a simple 8-inch-long kitchen knife, the same thing someone would use if they were preparing dinner. "Why didn't you just die?" "It was all planned out. I was going to be the one to lead the people of Konoha to the destruction of the Kyuubi. I was going to be a hero, but you just wouldn't die." Her voice was high, almost a screech, and as she was saying this she had moved further into the room. By the end of her speech, he made a mental note that she seemed to really like monologues for some reason. She had stopped right in front of Naruto, and stabbed the boy in the chest. He felt the pain as the blade pierced his skin, slipping through his ribs and puncturing his lung as a cold sensation started spreading around the wound. But Naruto didn't react at all, he didn't flinch, he didn't blink, he didn't even gasp. He just kept staring into her green eyes. This just made the woman angrier, so she kept stabbing, each time repeating the same word over and over again. Die. 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 It was while she was stabbing him over and over that something inside Naruto just snapped. Before the woman could stab him again, he grabbed her by the wrist, seizing the hand that held the knife, and with the same emotionless expression he had been wearing until to that point, broke it in one quick movement. She was in such shock that she stood there, staring at her wrist for a full minute, before she started to scream. Before she could get to a decent volume, Naruto leapt from his mattress, and pushed her to the ground, placing a hand over her mouth to silence her. Slowly leaning down so that his mouth was right next to her ear, Naruto made the first sound he had in a week. Shush, shush, shush. When he pulled away again, his hand still placed firmly over her mouth, she looked up into the young boy's eyes. What she saw made her stop struggling, and instead she froze in terror. His eyes weren't empty anymore. They were filled with predatory glee at what was about to happen. Then he started to giggle, then chuckle, then laugh until it reached full-blown hysterics. After about a minute of laughing, he stopped and once again leaned down so that he was next to her ear and said, in a voice so full of childlike innocence it made a cold shiver run down the pink-haired lady's spine. "Will you step into my parlor?" said the spider to the fly. And with those words, the small boy's body started to change before her eyes. He could feel it, the way his body shifted to his will, his muscles ripping and knitting back together under his skin. The way his bones were breaking, stretching and reforming into something different. The way his clothes just melded into his body, as if they were never there. It was excruciating, almost as painful as the feeling of being burned alive for hours on end, but more than that it was euphoric. He had never felt so alive. When it was done he stood up and stepped back from the pink-haired woman. She was so scared of what was in front of her that she couldn't scream. Standing in front of her, in all its 8-foot glory was she didn't even know what to call it, something out of a nightmare maybe? If only she knew. It actually was from a nightmare, one of Naruto's to be precise. His very skin was covered in an ivory white shell, the only clothing he had was a torn black cloth that covered his waist down to his knees, held up by bandages tied to his waist, his body covered in muscles reminiscent of a bodybuilder. Long spiky blonde hair went down to his feet, and strange red markings covered his entire body, huge hands with long, bony fingers tipped in vicious side-like claws. He had what seemed to be white spikes with red tips growing out of his shoulders pointing in random directions, and a long tail coming out the base of his spine, the end of which was a deep crimson, as if it had been dipped in fresh blood. But what really scared her was his face and chest. A demonized skull-like mask covered his face with long, sharp teeth spread in a horrifying grin with more of the red markings on the left side of its face. Cold yellow eyes ringed in black with a sickening glee shining in them as they stared down at her, and a hole in the center of his chest where his heart should be. Naruto just stood there a moment to admire himself in the reflection of the broken glass that was in his window. This was one of the creatures he had seen in his nightmares, right down to the last detail. He laughed, he couldn't stop himself. He absently noted that his voice had a strange echo to it, as if more than one voice was talking at the same time. The irony, for years this creature had haunted his nights, now it would be the image he would use to haunt others as well. Without saying a word he bent down and grabbed the pink-haired lady by her throat, lifting her up easily with one hand above his head and, with no effort at all, threw her through the broken window onto the street outside. Jumping out after her, he then slowly made his way over to her broken body. She was covered in cuts and glass shards from the window, both her arms were bent at odd angles, obviously broken in several places. She was still conscious, if only just. He couldn't have that. He wanted her fully aware for what he was about to do. Quicker than most eyes could see he speared her through the abdomen with the end of his tail, and held it there for a moment, listening to her gargled screams as blood rose in her throat. It was music to his ears. He then sent a small pulse of his chakra through his tail and into the woman on the ground at his feet. Instantly her eyes shot open, she started to scream as loud as her abused lungs would allow her, causing Naruto to stop yet again to listen to her screams. When he had enough of that he lifted up his right foot and brought it down on her, mostly uninjured, left leg, shattering the bone. He tilted his head to the side in fascination as her screaming changed pitch, so he did it again with her right leg, then each of her already broken arms. Each time he did this she made a new sound. A platoon of 5 Umbu that had heard the screams and came to investigate were watching in stunned silence as they saw something mutilating a woman, but what shocked them more was that it was the woman they had spent the last week looking for. She had somehow managed to get away on the night of the incident, and had avoided them ever since. A cat-masked Umbu turned to another with a dragon mask, asking in a clearly feminine voice, "What should we do, Captain?" The now identified captain remained quiet for a moment, staring at what was happening in stunned silence, before replying. "You go and inform the Hokage, we will stay here, and try to subdue it, hurry." With that she was gone in a swirl of leaves. The 4 remaining Umbu jumped off the building they were stood on, running towards the creature. Spying them out of the corner of his eye, Naruto grabbed his limp prey by the throat and held her to his chest to use as a human shield as he turned to face the Umbu, still cackling insanely. They stopped in their tracks, not expecting the creature to have seen them coming. Stepping forward the dragon-masked Umbu spoke. Drop the woman and get on the ground, do you understand me? The creature just laughed at him. Then, slowly reaching around the woman's stomach, dragged his free hand. Naruto used the claw on his index finger to slowly cut a line across her stomach. For a moment nothing happened before a red line appeared, followed by a burst of blood, and the pink-haired woman's intestines fell onto the floor with a wet squelch. The Umbu were shocked at the act of brutality, but what was even worse was that the woman was still alive. But not for long. Just before the light left her eyes, the creature reached a hand around her neck, and with one quick jerk, pulled her head from her shoulders. What little blood was left in her body spurted out of the hole where her head once sat, covering Naruto's face. What he did next shocked the Anbu as, in his echo-like voice, he started to sing. Ring, around the rosy. A pocket full of posies. Ashes, ashes. You all fall down. At the end of the song he started to laugh again, the sound of his voice echoing across the village as he threw his head back and laughed. One of the Umbu, a large man in a bear mask, ran forward. No! Stop! We have to take it together! Called out the captain, but it was too late. The bear-masked Umbu started to run through hand signs as he ran straight towards the beast, but before he could finish, the creature appeared in front of him, grabbing his arms just below the shoulders. The Umbu let out a scream as the hands got tighter and tighter, the arms falling to his sides limply, getting numbered by the second until, with a quick jerk, both his arms were pulled off just below the shoulder. But before he could get over his shock at the loss of his arms, Naruto used the one in his right hand as club, hitting him in the face so hard his head exploded in a shower of blood and gore. His laughter never letting up for even a second. Without further ado, the remaining 3 Umbus sprang into action. Wood style, tree binding. Instantly long pieces of wood shot out of the ground and wrapped themselves around the beast's arms, legs, neck, and chest. Fire style, great fireball. Wind style, great breakthrough. The 2 jutsu joined together, the fire being fueled by the wind, turning white from the increased heat, stopping the laughter as soon as the attack hit. The Umbu released a sigh of relief, only to take a step back in fear when the laughter started again, if weaker than before. Nothing had ever survived that combination, nothing. When the smoke cleared they could clearly see the creature still standing, if only just. Its body was covered in what seemed to be cracks. As they watched, the shell-like skin started to move, like millions of maggots were curling under it as its body started to shrink. The Hokage arrived with the cat-masked Umbu, just in time to see the beast before it disappeared, leaving an unconscious Naruto with a large crazy grin on his face, his small body almost completely covered in blood. Looking at the bloodbath before him, then to the 6-year-old boy, Sarutobi Hiruzen could only say one thing. Dear Kami, Naruto, what have you done? Time skip, 1 year later. Sarutobi slowly made his way down the dark corridor, a man in a long white doctor's coat just a few paces behind him with a clipboard in hand. Sarutobi wasn't in a rush. Honestly, he didn't really want to be here at all as the place filled him with an odd mixture of sadness, remorse, and regret. With a poker face developed through years of war, Sarutobi asked the man behind him. Has there been any progress in his condition or mental state? The man didn't even slow down as he looked down at the clipboard in his hand. I'm sorry, Hokage-sama, there has been no change in his condition since the last time you were here. He has shown some new shifts, but that is just an example of his seemingly endless creativity at work. Sarutobi just gave a nod and kept walking towards his destination. The institute was a depressing place. It was built underground and was designed for the express purpose of housing and rehabilitation of shinobi that couldn't cope with the stress or responsibilities of the job. Those ninja that had let their guilt or grief overwhelm them, or that had given in to their bloodlust. If a ninja had a mental breakdown, of any kind, they were sent here to be treated and contained. Because this place was designed to contain shinobi, it had the highest level of security possible. Built underground in the forests surrounding Konohagakure, there was only one entrance in and out, and it was manned by at a minimum of 5 chunin, or higher level ninja. On both sides of the corridor were solid steel doors with heavy locks and a small window so the workers and doctors could see into them. At the bottom of each door was a small locked hinge door. These were used to push food through. When he came to the last door in the corridor, he stopped. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, he looked through the small window in the door. It was more or less the same as all the other cells, white walls with a simple cot in the corner that was screwed into the floor to prevent the occupant from doing anything with it. What made this one stand out, however, was that the walls, floor, and roof were covered in blue glowing seals. They were the only source of light in the cell and made it look like something out of a drug-induced dream gone wrong. Another thing that made it stand out from the other cells was the fact that there was dried blood on the walls and floor along with the seals. Finally, the other thing that set this cell apart from the others was that it was the only one that didn't have a shinobi. This was the room of one Uzumaki Naruto. After what had happened with the Haruno woman, Sarutobi had done all he could to help Naruto. Sarutobi had him watched constantly and had Naruto visit therapists under armed guard, but Naruto always managed to slip his guard. It was during one of those times in which he went missing that villagers started to go missing or were found dead. Naruto was later found with the blood of the deceased all over his person. Sarutobi had no other choice after this had happened several times, but to put him here in this depressing prison for the insane. The seals were applied by his old student Jiraiya, who had been beside himself with rage when he heard that his godson had not only been treated like something less than human, but had been driven into insanity. On that day it took a lot of convincing, but Hiruzen managed to keep the Sannin from waging war against the village. Hiruzen shuddered to think of the damage Jiraiya and his summons could do before being taken down. The seals were designed to do two things according to Jiraiya. The first was to strengthen the walls of the cell to keep Naruto from using his shifts and advanced strength from damaging them, and the second was to constantly drain as much of Naruto's chakra as possible to attempt to keep him from hurting people. It turned out that because of the amount of healing the Kyuubi had done to it, Naruto's body had been practically saturated in its chakra. This had resulted in Naruto gaining chakra reserves far beyond what was thought possible even for a Jinchuriki. If anyone other than Naruto was to go in that room with the seals active, they would be killed in a matter of seconds. As it was, the seals only seemed to make him slightly tired, and Sarutobi made a mental note to recall Jiraiya to the village to increase the power of the seals. When the boy had first been admitted, they had sent a Yamanaka to try and assess his mental state. That had been a mistake. He was now in a white padded cell next to Naruto's, raving like a lunatic about nightmares, monsters, and darkness. A few weeks later, a doctor had gone in to try to talk to the boy, and that was the source of the dried blood on the walls and floor, as they weren't willing to risk another life to clean up the mess. Looking into the room, Sarutobi started to panic when he didn't see anyone in the room. He was about to turn around to ask the doctor where Naruto was when he jumped back from the door, heart beating a mile a minute, when a face appeared just on the other side of the glass. But it wasn't Naruto's. The face in the glass was that of a pale girl with long, messy neon green hair that had grim visible in places. She was so pale she had an almost blue glow to it from the seals. She had dark rings around her mouth and glowing orange eyes with silted pupils, a small smirk on her face as she looked at Sarutobi. Just looking at her sent shivers down the old Hokage's spine. "Stop playing games, Naruto. I'm not in the mood for it today." The girl's smirk turned into a full-blown grin at the old man's words, showing her slime-covered black teeth that appeared to all be filed to a point. "Ah, you don't want to play with me? That's not fair. The doctors are boring. They've seen most of what I can do. But you, I've got so much I can show you." Her voice sounded so innocent, like the tinkling of small bells. It didn't seem right that a voice like that would come out of something so twisted. The Hokage didn't say anything, just stared into her bright orange eyes with no fear or emotion. Eventually, after the two had stared at each other for a few minutes, the girl broke eye contact and pouted. As the two men watched, they could see the face change into that of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy. His face covered in bandages. "You're no fun, old man." Turning his back to the door, Naruto walked away and jumped onto his cot in the corner. This gave Sarutobi and the doctor that was accompanying him a good view of the boy. He had grown. When he was first brought here, he was barely 3 feet 5 inches and very malnourished. Now, he was 4 feet 6 inches, and still growing. He was still very thin, but no matter what the doctors gave him, he wouldn't put on weight. He was wearing a modified black straitjacket with a hood attached at the back of the neck, the sleeves hanging down past his arms, almost touching the floor. Plain black trousers going down to just above his bandaged feet. No skin could be seen due to the bandages that covered his skin. He just lay there, staring at the reinforced concrete roof of his cell. Every now and then he would break out into chuckles, as if someone was telling him jokes that only he could hear. If only they knew. "How have you been, Naruto?" He didn't answer straight away, but when the Hokage was about to ask again, he spoke. "I am how I am and I'm not how I'm not." More laughing. Sarutobi sighed again. He was used to this, getting roundabout answers that didn't really tell him anything. He was about to turn away when he heard Naruto call him back. "Hey, old man." "Yes, Naruto." As he looked back at the boy, he could see him trying to hold back more laughter. "What has no legs, no arms and goes ahhhhhhhhhhh?" "Naruto." "Guess." "Stop it, Naruto." "I said guess." Sarutobi was slightly taken aback as Naruto yelled at him in a demonic voice. I don't know, Naruto, what is it? At this point, Naruto finally took his eyes off the roof and locked eyes with Sarutobi. A villager after I've pulled their limbs off. They kept eye contact for several more seconds before Naruto started laughing again. Without another word, Sarutobi turned around and left, the sound of Naruto's insane laughter following him down the corridor. Time skip, 5 years later. 6 years, it had been 6 years since the incident. 6 years since Naruto had killed those people and have landed himself in the institute. Sarutobi had visited Naruto once a week for that entire time and had talked to him at least briefly. In that time, Naruto had never improved. During this time, life in the village returned to normal and many villagers celebrated the incarceration of the demon child. A few became neutral when details of the incident were released. They still didn't like the boy. But after what had happened, they were at least neutral and weren't able to push the Hokage. He couldn't believe he let Danzo talk him into this. It was a big risk. But if it worked, Naruto would have a chance to be outside the institute once again. Making his way down the corridor towards Naruto's cell, he couldn't help but hope the boy would agree with his proposal. Looking into the room, it still surprised him just how much it took to keep the boy contained. When he was younger, it had been easy enough, just the seals around the room could stop him. But as time went by, they found out that there was a side effect to the seals. Since the seals were on all the time, Naruto's chakra coils had been under a constant strain for 6 years. This had the result of his already unbelievable reserves growing even larger and larger. So every year they needed to increase the security, as it constantly took more and more to keep Naruto from being able to escape at will. The walls were the same, covered in seals and dried blood, but now there was no cot in the corner. Naruto was kneeling in the center of the cell. A thick black metal collar around his neck was bolted to the floor with thick, black chains. Naruto's hands and feet were cuffed as well, and the cuffs were chained together and to the floor to limit his movement as much as possible. All the chains covered in the same seals as the walls. The boy looked up when he noticed Sarutobi standing at the window to his cell. Naruto didn't say anything, he just stared at him with that insane grin that Naruto had become so well known for among the staff. How have you been, Naruto? I am how I am and I'm not how I'm not. This had become a routine for the two. It was almost enough to bring a smile to the old man's face. It was one of the few things Naruto did that didn't have any malicious intent behind it. I have a proposition for you. At the mention of the proposition, Naruto got an odd look in his eye. This was new. After making sure he had Naruto's full attention, Sarutobi continued. You can't spend the rest of your life here, and a majority of the council agrees, as they believe you to be an asset to the village. So we have decided to offer you a chance to become a ninja of Konohagakure. There was a moment of silence before Naruto's grin spread even wider. I'm listening. You would need to behave. No killing or mauling any civilian, clients, classmates, teammates, teachers, or other shinobi of the leaf. I think I could do that. This brought a smile to the old man's face. Naruto had agreed, and that is all Sarutobi needed. Good, I will be back soon to take you to the academy to meet the other genin. As you don't know the academy jutsu, you will be allowed to skip the exam. Seeing as you are, I don't think you will have a problem with ninja life. As he turned to go and fill in the necessary paperwork, he stopped when Naruto asked him a question. Hey, old man, I can still kill other ninja, right? At the end of this, he was starting to chuckle to himself. Sarutobi thought about that for a moment before saying, Yes, Naruto, you can kill other ninjas so long as they are not allied with us. With that, Sarutobi left. Sarutobi listened to Naruto's laughter and thought about the effects of what he was about to unleash on the shinobi world. As Yumino Irika stood in front of his class, he could already feel the headache coming on. It was the last day of the academy, and they still wouldn't be quiet. Taking a big breath, he did the hand sign for his infamous big head jutsu. Shut the hell up, you brats. Instantly everything went quiet. That's better. Now, as you know, today is the day you are sorted into your 3-man teams. The problem with this is that we are 1 person short. However, the Hokage has found a suitable candidate, and will be bringing that person here in a few minutes. So I want you all on your best behavior. At hearing that there would be someone new, the class burst into whispers. Whoever it is, if they were handpicked by the Hokage himself, then they must be strong. It even got the attention of one Uchiha Sasuke, who thought, finally, someone that might give me a challenge. It was at this point that Inuzuka Kiba decided to share his thoughts. Wait a minute, what about the exam? We all took it, It's not fair if this new guy doesn't have to. Calm down, Kiba, there are special circumstances that not even I know about. But when they get here, you can ask the Hokage yourself. That seemed to satisfy the boy and the rest of the class for the time being. It was a few minutes later that a knock was heard at the door. The class fell silent again as Irika went to open it. Welcome, Hokage-sama. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come down here. It's no problem, Irika. After the old Hokage walked into the room, the class could see the boy that stood behind him. He was tall, very tall, and skinny. At 6 feet minus 3 inches, he was the tallest 12-year-old any of them had ever seen. But because of the way he stood slightly hunched over, it was hard to tell his true height. He had on a strange black jacket with what looked like steel buckles all over it, a hood sewed into the back of the neck, and sleeves that went down past his hands and to his knees. He had a long, spiky blonde-haired mane that went down his back to just above his waist, and bandages covering any place flesh could have been exposed. The only parts of his face that could be seen were his blue eyes and his mouth that had a huge grin on his face. His appearance unnerved everyone in the class a little. It was at this point that the kids saw their teacher Irika. He was backed against the wall, staring at the boy in front of him with wide, fear-filled eyes. This caused confusion in many people's minds, but they dismissed it for now. Seeing his reaction, Sarutobi addressed the now clearly terrified man. Don't worry, Irika, Naruto has promised me he will behave himself. This did calm the man a little. If there was one thing known about the boy, it was that he has never broken his word. It was a mystery. No matter how insane he was, he still had some kind of moral code. It baffled the Yamanaka clan immensely, as they have never run into a situation like that before. Unfortunately, nobody knew what most of the code was, with the acceptation of the boy and maybe the Hokage to a limited extent. But Irika was still not sure that it was a good idea. Are you absolutely sure, Hokage-sama? Very, you have nothing to worry about, isn't that right, Naruto? Naruto? When the boy didn't answer, the old man turned to face the boy. But he wasn't there. Quickly looking around, he spotted the boy crouched on a desk staring down at Sasuke, their faces only inches apart. The class and Irika were stunned. They hadn't even seen him move. When Sasuke had gotten over his own shock, he asked in a clearly irritated voice. What are you looking at? Naruto just kept staring. When Sasuke had enough, he was about to ask again, and that was when Naruto asked. Did you know you have a duck's ass on your head? At this, the class burst out laughing, all except for the Uchiha and a few of his fangirls. But when Sasuke made a grab at him, he was already back next to the Hokage. Naruto, you said you would behave. Naruto turned his face to look at him, and replied. No, I said I wouldn't kill, maim, or permanently break them. You never said anything about behaving. The class was shocked at his words, to talk about such things without any hesitation. What the hell was wrong with this guy? Sarutobi took a deep breath, then let it out slowly and thought. At least he didn't kill anyone yet. Just introduce yourself so we can move on, please. Whatever, old man. Shocking the class yet again at his disrespect. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like what I like and I hate what I hate, though nothing I hate seems to be around for long when I hate it. After saying this, he broke out into giggles. I don't have a dream or goal in my life, because quite frankly, I don't actually have any will to live. After seeing their faces when he said this, he couldn't hold it in any longer. He laughed and laughed. With the introduction out of the way, Naruto just sat on the floor where he was, the Hokage having quieted him down. Deciding to humor him, the Hokage nodded to Irika to continue with the team placements. Right, well then. Team 1 will be comprised of. It went on like that for several minutes. Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura and Inuzuka Kiba under Hatake Kakashi. When Irika had said her name, Sakura had jumped up screaming about true love. It was then that Naruto saw her, and grinned wider. She reminded him of the pink-haired lady. When Sakura had calmed down, Irika had continued. Team 8, Hyuga Hinata, Aburame Shino and Uzumaki Naruto under Yuhi Kurenai, and finally, Team 10, Akimichi Choji, Nara Shikamaru and Yamanaka Ino under Sarutobi Asuma. When he finished reading out the names, he put down the list and said, I want you to know that I am proud of all of you and that I expect great things from you all, and remember, you are all shinobi of the leaf now. That is a big responsibility. I trust you to act accordingly. Your new instructors will be here soon to pick you up. With that done, both Irika and the Hokage left the room, Irika looking back over his shoulder as he went out, then closing the door behind him. leaving the class alone with Naruto. They all looked at him for a moment, and he just looked back with that huge grin on his face and thought, I think I'm going to enjoy this. Yuhi Kurenai was a beautiful woman, no one could or would argue with that, especially the men that hit on her. She was an average height for a woman at 5 feet 6 inches, with long brown hair that cascaded down her back and a wonderful hourglass figure that was the envy of almost every woman in Konohagakure. Her clothes were made of what appeared to be bandages, with one red sleeve, white shorts and a mesh undershirt. She wore almost no makeup since she didn't really need it, just some red lipstick and blue eyeshadow, and with her exotic red eyes she was without a doubt one of the most beautiful ninja in the village. She was also very nervous. She had been called into the Hokage's office ahead of the normal Jonin-sensei meeting time, and she really didn't know why. She was shown into the room and stood nervously in front of the village's leader waiting for him to address her. The Hokage finished signing a document before he put down his pen and looked up at Kurenai. I am glad you are here, and I am sure you're wondering why I asked you here early. Kurenai nodded. I am just concerned I won't be getting a team this year. You will be getting a team this year, you don't have to worry about that. The reason I asked you here is to talk about who will be on your team. Alright, but why couldn't that have waited for the normal Jonin meeting, sir? Because frankly I am giving you a very special student this year. Alright, who will I be teaching then? I have made your team into an information gathering and infiltration team with an element of frontline assault for when the mission become fucked up beyond all reason. You will be training Hyuga Hinata, Aburame Shino and Uzumaki Naruto. Hokage-sama, you can't be serious. That boy is dangerous. Kurenai had an incredulous look on her face. Maybe the old man's age was finally catching up to him. She knew of the boy, hell everyone knew of him. She didn't blame him for being the QB container, if anything she felt sorry for him. But he was put in the institution for a reason. Kurenai, calm down, I know what I am doing. Do you think that I would put you or your other students at risk? Despite what many think, he is not as dangerous as the villagers would like you to believe. With all due respect, he was put in a crazy house for broken ninja for a reason. He killed innocent people. How could you say he is not as dangerous as they say? Sarutobi looked at her for a long minute before he sighed. Kurenai, I'm disappointed in you. Those words shocked her, but before she could say anything he continued. As a ninja you should always look underneath the underneath. And as an intelligence gatherer you should know better than to listen to hearsay from a group of bitter villagers, especially when they have never had anything to back up their claims. Did it ever occur to you that if those villagers were innocent that Naruto would have been put to death? Kurenai's eyes widened at the implications. But if that's true, I don't understand. I thought you put him in the institute because he was dangerous? I did, but at the time there were too many holes, too many things that didn't add up, so I looked into it further. It turns out that Naruto, in the few weeks leading up to him being put in the institute, never technically did anything wrong. Kurenai was about to object to this, but again the Hokage continued before she could. In the case of Miss Haruno, self-defense, there was never any doubt about that. It was the way that Naruto handled it that set off alarms, but the others. Here Sarutobi took out his pipe and lit it, taking a deep breath before he continued. The 3 men, self-defense, turns out they were drunk and attacked him. The 2 men and the ally, it was later found out that they had been attempting to rape a young girl. Naruto stopped them and even took the girl back to her house. The orphanage's care workers, we found out they were selling children into slavery outside the village. Every one of the people Naruto killed was later found to have either attacked him first or found guilty of crimes against the village that carried a death penalty anyway. Kurenai didn't know what to say. How could she have been pulled in by the villagers so easily? She prided herself on her ninja skills. But this was a huge mistake on her part. But then something occurred to her. But Hokage-sama, if this is true, then why was he kept in the school? Surely he should have been released when this was found out. Why did you leave him there? At this question the Hokage got a sad look in his eyes. Because he asked me to. Again, Kurenai was shocked. Nobody asked to be kept in such a horrible and isolating place as the institute. But why? Sarutobi took another deep breath from his pipe before letting it out again. At that point Naruto still had some semblance of his old self. He still does, though it's buried under a very thick layer of insanity. In a moment of lucidity he realized what was happening to him. He could see what was happening and knew that if he didn't get away from people for a while he could lose himself completely. So he asked to be left in the school until I thought he could be trusted. I have watched him over the years, and I can honestly say that although he is the most insane, dangerous, and fucked up person I have ever met. He is also one of my most trusted people. At seeing the confused look on the young woman's face, he elaborated. It is true that Naruto is insane, but he has still kept what makes him a good person. It is what makes him different from many that lose their minds. He has morals, they can be hard to see, but they are there. He never hurts children, scares them, yes, but never hurt them. He also has a respect for women, which all things considered is a miracle. He also will never break a promise once it has been made, but he rarely will give you his word, or he will word his response to allow himself some leeway. Kurenai didn't know what to say. Naruto just didn't make any sense to her, but that wasn't really surprising since Naruto didn't make sense to anyone. However, this made her stop her train of thought. There is a problem that you need to be aware of with Naruto. He can't control himself when he kills. When he goes into fight mode, he won't stop until he decides that there is no longer any threats in the area to kill. He will make anyone that he deems worth killing go through extreme pain before he will let them die. He has been known to scare Anbu with his methods, both psychological and physical. To be honest, Enko and Ibiki have watched Naruto to learn new ways of getting information out of people. I was even at one point letting Naruto out just so he could help train Anbu. That worried Kurenai. Anbu are trained to be fearless, to not let anything bother them, and they are the best of the best. But for his methods to spark interest with Enko and Ibiki means he had to be extremely good. If Anbu were scared of what a 12-year-old boy could do, then he had to know what to do to get under people's skin. Taking a deep breath, Kurenai asked, "Can you tell me anything about his abilities? As far as I know, this kid has never had any sort of training? If he is going to be on my team, I need to know what to expect." This made Sarutobi smile, as she was willing to give Naruto a chance. He has enhanced senses far above that of an Inuzuka, enhanced strength, reflexes, and he is able to process information at an astonishing rates. He has been out of the school for only 2 days and has been at the Konohagakure library the entire time reading. I have been testing his progress and comprehension on the books he has read since he started, and he went from being unable to do math to doing basic algebra. His reading speed and ability has shot up from that of a 6-year-old to that of someone easily in their 20s. He has already read through the entire academy curriculum, and I have tested him on it. He got a perfect score for the information portion. While he is not reading every book, he is certainly gathering and learning information that he feels he needs, and if he continues to act this way, I am considering giving him access to the village technique vault just to see how many techniques he can read, practice, and master, although I might have to restrict him to the lower level techniques until he makes Chunin. This surprised Kurenai. To be able to read and understand so much information in such a short time was truly amazing. He also has a bloodline. It has been designated as shapeshifter, as he is able to become almost anything. If he can picture it in his mind, he can more than likely become it. It is similar to the transformation jutsu. But unlike the transformation jutsu, he physically changes his body. The implications of this were spinning through Kurenai's head. To be able to become anything, the potential was practically limitless. However, there is a catch. The longer he uses it, the harder it is to keep it up, or in some cases, to come back. From what he has told me, he is currently able to hold a basic shift, as he called it, for 3 days, but the more complex it is, the harder it gets. He said a basic shift is anything that keeps the general humanoid shape and isn't any bigger or smaller than his current size. This made perfect sense to Kurenai. With every bloodline there was always a weakness. She also now understood why he was on her team. With a bloodline to change into anything, he could make a great intelligent gatherer, and with his heavy hitter abilities, he could cover the rest of them if they needed to retreat or escape from a tough situation. She was broken out of her thoughts when the Hokage stood up from his chair. "I'm sorry, Kurenai, but I need to go and check on him now," before he decided to put some of the information that he has gathered to use and moves on to something else that would not be as beneficial to the village. "I hope I can trust you to teach your future students to the best of your ability." Standing up from her chair, Kurenai did a small bow to her leader and replied, "Yes, Hokage-sama, I understand and I welcome the challenge." Kurenai waited outside for the rest of the Jonin, and the meeting went on without any problems as everyone was given a team to teach and train. After the meeting, the Jonin went out for lunch. She was now on her way to meet her team with the other senseis and just couldn't stop herself from feeling nervous, only for all the Jonin to stop at the door when they heard the voices inside the room. They all sat in silence for a few minutes, just staring at the strange boy in front of them. He was just sitting there, looking around the room with that creepy grin on his face. Eventually Kiba, being the hyperactive loudmouth he is, took it upon himself to break it. Standing up from his seat, he made his way to the front of the room where Naruto was sat, smirking to himself, not seeing Akamaru shrinking back into his hood and shaking slightly. "So you're the guy that was too good to go to the academy like the rest of us. You don't look so strong." I bet you don't even know any jutsu. Naruto just sat there for a moment, looking up at Kiba. Slowly, standing up, he looked Kiba in the eyes and asked, "What's a jutsu?" Wait, now I remember reading about that. Unfortunately, no, I do not know how to perform any of those yet, just haven't had the time to try out the ones I read about. The other children in the room looked at Naruto incredulously. What kind of ninja didn't know how to perform a jutsu? Kiba started laughing and pointing at Naruto, and then so did the rest of the class. You don't even know how to use a jutsu, huh? Where have you been for the past few years? Locked in a cell lined with chakra sapping seal inside a mental institution for dangerously insane ninja. That turned the laughter into shocked silence. Was he serious? What the hell? You're joking, right? Nope, the people there were really boring. Hey, did you know you need a bath? You smell like dog piss. This got to Kiba. Nobody embarrasses him in front of his class, nobody. What did you say? I am going to fucking kill you. In his rage, Kiba charged at Naruto without thinking. But before Kiba could lay a hand on him, Naruto had his right hand on the back of Kiba's head and was slamming it into the ground, or so it seemed. Just before Kiba's face connected, it stopped. Bending down, Naruto said to him, loud enough for all to hear, "I have killed people for attacking me, and the only reason I haven't killed you is because I promised the old man I wouldn't. But know this, the next time you try to do that, you won't be able to walk away. Think yourself lucky I left you unscathed this time." And with that, he let Kiba fall to the ground, his grin still on his face. Kiba shuffled away as quick as possible, and then made his way back to his seat. The room was quiet again, no one knowing what to say after that. Hell, no one even wanted to look towards Naruto after that. What no one expected, though, was for Sakura to slowly get up from her seat and make her way over to Naruto, trying to tell her old friend to come back. When she was in front of him, she asked, "You said your name was Naruto?" At his nod, she continued, "My dad said that if I was ever to meet you, to say that we are sorry for my mother's actions to you and to ask for forgiveness, but he never said why." She let the question hang, hoping he would explain. Naruto just gave her an odd look for a minute, before his grin faded into a genuine smile. "Thank you, and tell your father that there is nothing to forgive. Her actions were her own, and I hold no grudge against you or your family." At hearing this, Sakura let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "As for what she did, I can honestly say that your mother made me what I am today." When he said this, his grin returned in full force and he began to chuckle. It sent a shiver up her spine, as well as all those in the room, but before anyone could comment further on this, the door opened and a group of people walked into the room. One by one, they introduced themselves as the leaders of their respective teams and took their respective teams out of the room. "Team 8, I'm your Jonin sensei, Yuhi Kurinai. Please follow me." Shino, Hinata, and Naruto followed her out of the room. Hinata, Shino, and Naruto said nothing on their way to the training ground, all lost in their own thoughts. Shino and Hinata didn't know what to think of the boy. He seemed strong, but from what they had seen, he was completely out of his mind. Naruto was staring at his hand intently as a beetle had landed on it, and he was smiling the whole time it was there. To anyone watching him, it would appear as if that beetle was the most interesting thing in the whole world. This caught Shino's attention, as it was his beetle that he had sent out. He had put one on Hinata as well, but he didn't need to test her. Shino wanted to see if Naruto would kill it, but Naruto just seemed fascinated by the creature. He even noticed that Naruto began to push chakra into his hand to let the bug eat it. This really caught Shino off guard. Kurinai was trying not to smile. She had heard everything that had gone on in the room and was happy to know that he didn't hold a grudge. Or kill the Inuzuka boy for that matter. But she didn't notice Naruto feeding his chakra into Shino's beetle, as she didn't know all the ins and outs of the Aburame clan's bugs. And Naruto was thinking, "I wonder what I can do with this beetle, and I wonder if it eats wood. I wonder what wood tastes like. I bet it tastes like starch. Wait, what does starch taste like?" When they had come to Training Ground 8, Kurinai motioned for them to sit down. When they were all seated, she spoke. "Right, my name is Yuhi Kurinai. I am 24 years old and am going to be your new sensei. I specialize in genjutsu and traps. I like reading and training, and my dream is to prove that women can be just as good at being ninja as men. Now, who wants to introduce themselves next?" Shino raised his hand and began to speak in a stoic monotone. "My name is Aburame Shino and I am 12 years old. I specialize in my clan's jutsu. I like studying new insects and training with my hive, and hope to prove that my clan is not weak just because we use insects, and to surpass my father as a ninja and as a clan head by being able to control and hold more hives than him. Nodding at this, Kurenai turned to Hinata. I am Hyuga Hinata. I am T12 years old and ISP specialize in my CL clan's jutsu. I hope to one day unite my clan by getting rid of the caged bird seal. Hearing the stutter, Kurenai made a note to introduce the girl to Anko. If anyone could break her of it, it would be her. Turning to her last student, she was surprised to see him tuning a beautiful black violin that seemed to have designs carved into it. Where the hell had he got a violin? After a minute he seemed satisfied and spoke. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I am 12 years old. I specialize in infiltration, torture, and I am a chakra powerhouse. On top of that, I am currently learning several other things as well. I enjoy learning new things and using my bloodline. I have nothing I wish to accomplish, as frankly I have nothing to live for, but I figure that while I am here I might as well explore the world around me and fight some of the more powerful people I run across. At hearing that he was learning other things, Kurenai got interested. What other things are you learning? Looking back up at her from his violin, he said. Well, I am currently looking into weapon crafting, seal making, jutsu making, and a few different taijutsu styles that I plan to merge together into my own personal style, as well as studying up on kenjutsu. I think I will also be reading up on the Hyuga and Aburame clans to understand my teammates' fighting styles better. Kurenai and the two genin didn't know what to think. Most ninja picked a specialty and stuck with it, but here was Naruto looking at several different aspects like it was nothing. If he mastered even half of what he was learning, then he would be a force to reckon with in no time. If they only knew what he could truly do. While they stared at him, Naruto had started to play his violin, which, considering his hands were still covered by his sleeves, was impressive. Kurenai didn't know what he was playing. It started off slow but was slowly getting quicker. It was then that Kurenai felt it, the feeling of someone casting a genjutsu. Naruto was channeling a huge amount of chakra into the violin, which caused the carvings to glow a faint blue. The instrument acted to cast a wide-scale genjutsu. Smiling to herself, she discreetly cancelled its effects on herself, but not the others. Naruto was doing her job for her. Her test was to see if they could detect and dispel a genjutsu anyway, so why not let him do it? As she watched, she saw Hinata and Shino fall into some kind of trance. A few minutes later, Shino was the first to notice something was wrong, his bugs telling him that he was in a genjutsu. Calmly putting his hand on Hinata's shoulder, he broke them both out of the genjutsu. When she was sure they were both out of the genjutsu, Kurenai said, "Good work, Shino, and well done for helping your teammate out, but I have to ask, Naruto, why did you try to put us in a genjutsu in the first place?" When she asked this, Naruto stopped playing and looked at her strangely. "What the hell are you talking about? I can't cast a genjutsu to save my life. I've got too much chakra to control even the most powerful of genjutsus. If I wanted to actually use a genjutsu, then I would have to cast one with an area effect of the entire village." This surprised Kurenai. He was right, he did have too much chakra to do genjutsu, but she had assumed that was why he was using a violin as a means to control and as a catalyst. But how he was doing it without even knowing it, she didn't know. She would have to talk to the Hokage about this. "Naruto, are you saying you didn't know you were channeling chakra through your violin while you were playing it?" "Of course I was, it's something I read in a book about chakra control. This is actually my 5th violin in the last day, they kept exploding because I was pushing too much chakra into it. Had to put a reinforcement seal on this one, that is what all these carving are actually." The casual way that he said this made her laugh. As if exploding violins were normal, although, this was Naruto after all, who knew what went on in his head. Hinata and Shino were confused, so asked, "WWW, what do you mean, Kurenai sensei?" "I agree, I don't understand." Turning to face the two, Kurenai said, "It's quite simple really. Naruto here was channeling chakra through his violin, and it acted like a catalyst for a sound-based genjutsu, which I would like to point out are more powerful than normal genjutsu. But the interesting thing is he did it without knowing he was doing it. The genjutsu acted on its own and hypnotized us." None of the genin knew what to say to that. Then Naruto started to laugh. When he had calmed down, Kurenai told them, "Now, normally this would be where I give you your true genin exam, but seeing as Naruto beat me to it, you all pass. Congratulations, you are all now official genin of Konohagakure. Meet me here tomorrow at 6 a.m., and we can start your training." With that, the 3 genin left to do their own things. Letting out a deep breath, Kurenai stood up and left to report to the Hokage. She never noticed that Naruto had come back to the training grounds. Walking up to the tree he had seen earlier, he pulled a branch off and bit into it. Yuck! Tastes like wood. Meanwhile, Shino was walking home when he sensed the beetle that he had placed on Naruto returning to him. The second the beetle returned, it had started mixing with the hive. He immediately knew something was off. The beetle seemed stronger, and it seemed that any beetle that was near that one started to get that boost of strength. Shino quirked an eyebrow before thinking. Interesting, it seems that something about Naruto has made my Kakachu stronger. I will have to either talk to him about this or observe to see what about Naruto is doing this. Shino, not one to disregard an advantage, started to cultivate his hive to have the advanced traits shown in the enhanced Kakachu that had returned from Naruto. It had about a week and the new teammate had settled into a nice routine. They would train for the first half of the day and then in the afternoon they would get a mission, but whenever they went out for a mission things would get interesting. Kurenai was at her wit's end. This was her team's 4th D rank and Naruto was driving them all crazy. Their first mission had been to paint a civilian's house. It went okay at first, but the problem came when the client's wife came home and saw Naruto. By the time her husband had calmed her down and took her into the house, nobody noticed that Naruto had painted the house bright pink instead of the white the client had supplied them with. They still didn't know where he got the damn paint. The second mission had been to weed an old lady's garden. This had gone fine until she refused to pay Naruto. While Kurenai had been arguing with her, Naruto had replaced all her plants with cannabis, which, while legal, was frowned upon. This was another thing that baffled the team, as they still didn't know where he got the plants, though Kurenai was more worried at the thought of a high Naruto. The third had been to catch Tora. This had actually gone okay. Seems Naruto had a way with animals. He had been the first ninja ever to just walk up to Tora and pick him up. The problem had come when he left with the little beast for about an hour. Nobody knew what he did, but after that mission it became a lot harder to catch the cat whenever it escaped from its owner. One genin team had claimed that they had seen the demon cat jumping through the trees like a ninja animal. The mission had been simple: get the shopping done for a woman that had broken her leg. The problem had come when she had given Naruto a dirty look. At the time the boy had just ignored her, but his team had got to know him over the past few weeks and knew he was going to do something. He never let something go. This was why Kurenai was watching him like a hawk. So far everything was fine. They had just gotten back to the client's house without incident, and were just waiting for their pay. When the client had been paying them, she had gave Naruto another dirty look and tried to give him half what she owed him. The feeling of dread that had increased when Naruto didn't say anything, just stood there grinning like the man he was. A few minutes later they had gotten the money and were on their way to report to the Hokage when they heard a scream from inside the house. Rushing back inside, they had arrived to see the woman sitting on the floor, covered in bright red paint. Naruto had somehow put a paint bomb in her shopping bags when they weren't looking. Letting out a deep breath, Kurenai and the other two genin started to help her off the floor and to a chair in the living room. The whole time Naruto was laughing his head off, rolling around on the floor. It took them an hour to calm her down. Now here they were stood in front of the Hokage in his office. For a full minuet he said nothing, just sat there looking at Naruto with his pipe in hand. "I thought we talked about this, Naruto. You can't keep attacking clients." Naruto just stood there, giggling. "Well, technically she wasn't a client when it went off. We had finished the mission." None of them knew what to say to this. He was right. They had finished the mission. Sighing to himself, Sarutobi just waved a hand for them to leave. "Whatever, I'm getting too old for this shit, just go." With that they left to go to the training grounds. It had been a few weeks since the disaster week of missions, and Team 8 had decided to hold off on doing missions as a team for a while, but Kurenai had encouraged Hinata and Shino to continue to do them solo when they had time, at least until they could stop Naruto from being Naruto. Kurenai, Hinata and Shino were currently waiting for Naruto at Training Ground 8. It was one of the more secluded training grounds. With a large lake and small wooded area, it was a good place to train. Today Kurenai was planning to teach Hinata and Shino how to water walk. She would have been teaching Naruto it as well, but he was having problems with tree walking. The last time he tried, he was blown off so hard he not only broke the tree he was trying to walk on, but 3 other trees as well when he flew into them. For some reason Naruto was always a few minutes late to team training. After waiting for a little longer, they decided to start without him. It was half an hour later when Naruto walked into the training grounds, a strange bundle on his back. This put them all on edge. Though Naruto had never done anything to them, they were still cautious. When he got to them, he put the bundle down and waved. "Hey guys, I got you something." Slowly making their way over, the group looked at the bundle on the floor nervously. Seeing their faces, Naruto laughed. "Don't worry so much, it's not going to explode, at least I don't think they will," he said with a thoughtful look on his face. This did not fill them with confidence. Reaching down and unfolding the package, Naruto took a step back and looked at them all expectantly. So what do you think? They didn't really know what to think. On the ground before them were the most bizarre yet beautiful weapons any of them had ever seen. The first was what looked to be some sort of launcher. It had a long barrel, but it didn't seem capable of firing kunai. It was encased in a leather holster. The weapon itself was also covered in strange markings that they soon realized were seals carved perfectly into the metal. The next was a long metal pipe, about 3 feet in length, with a small needle-like point. On closer inspection they realized that it was hollow, and that there was a small hole in the end. This was also attached to leather straps and was covered in similar seals as the first. The last was a pair of elegant gauntlets. The metal was white and the middle finger had a sharp, pin-like point in the end. They were designed to go up to just below the elbows and had seals all over them. After a while Kurenai looked at Naruto and said, "They are beautiful, Naruto, but where did you get them and why did you bring them?" Naruto gave her one of his rare, sincere smiles when she asked that. "Well, remember when I said that I was looking into weapon making?" They all grow shocked looks on their faces when he said this. "You mean you made these?" "Yep, I made a deal with a smith in the village. I get to use his workshop and I let him look over some of my designs and use the ones he likes so long as I get a percentage of the profits. Nice guy, open-minded." Naruto seemed to get lost in his own mind. Flashback. Naruto was in a good mood, things just seemed to be going his way today. He had just met his team and successfully became a full ninja, and he had a feeling that his team would be fun to be around. They all seemed like good people, so he wouldn't need to kill them later on, which was a plus, and they all were interesting, which means Naruto wouldn't get bored. But the thing that had put him in a great mood is the fact that he just successfully snuck into the Umbu headquarters and dyed all their uniforms bright orange. The look on their faces was priceless, and he was glad he brought a camera. Naruto was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't realize he had wandered into a back alley of the market district of Konoha. When he did take notice of his surroundings, he found himself outside a small shop. It had an old wooden sign in the shape of a kunai hung over the door, the universal sign for a shinobi shop. The windows were so dirty that he couldn't see inside. He couldn't see a name anywhere, and there didn't seem to be any other shops in the area. His interest piqued. Naruto pushed the door open and went inside to see what they had to offer. The inside was the same as the outside of the shop, dark and dirty. There was just enough light to see without bumping into anything. But beyond that, the shelves were stocked with an assortment of different weapons from kunai to swords. They looked to be of very high quality, but they all had a thick layer of dust coating them. In one corner of the store, Naruto could see ninja clothes and armor on display. If he had to guess, Naruto would say that this shop hadn't had a customer in a long time. Smiling to himself at the thought, Naruto made his way to the back of the room in hopes of finding someone that he could talk to. Maybe the owner, and he did. There, at the back of the room, leaning on a counter, was a large middle-aged man. He was big, almost 7 foot tall, with huge muscles and large hands. He had on a fine gray sleeveless shirt under a thick leather apron and thick pants. The top of his head was shaved, and he had a thick black beard. Scars littered the man's skin, showing of past battles and time-round weapon. When the man saw Naruto, he stood up and looked at the boy with hope in his eyes before saying in a deep voice, "Please tell me you want to buy something." Naruto wasn't surprised at the pleading tone. It seemed he was right about the shop not having much business. "You make the weapon here, or do you order everything from a producer?" The large man was surprised at the boy's question. "I make the weapon in here using the forge in the back. Why?" When the man said this, Naruto's grin stretched even bigger. "I've been looking for a forge to rent out, so I can work on a few projects of mine in peace." This got the man thinking. If he let the boy use his smithy, he could charge him and make a bit of money. Kami knew he needed the money. "Name's Higashi, and if you can pay, then I don't see a problem with letting you use my workshop." Taking the man's outstretched hand to shake, Naruto replied, "Uzumaki, Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto had expected a lot of things when he told Higashi his name, insults, and shouting being at the top of the list. But what happened was enough to shock even him. Higashi's eyes widened at his name, and he let out a small gasp. Without letting go of the young boy's hand, the muscular man pulled him forward and hugged him. Naruto stiffened at first, thinking he was being attacked, until he felt water falling onto his face. Looking up at the mountain of a man, Naruto was shocked yet again when he saw the tears falling down his face. Thank you. When Higashi let the shocked blonde go, he let out a hearty laugh and explained. I never got a chance to thank you for what you did for my family. You might not remember about 6 years ago you saved a girl from being raped in an alley not far from here. That was my daughter, Tenten. I'd been waiting for years to thank you. Naruto just tilted his head to one side and thought. Short girl in a Chinese-style dress with buns in her hair, looks kind of like a panda? Higashi just laughed again and nodded his head. Small world, how's she doing nowadays? She became a ninja, graduated last year. She'll be glad to see you. No one knew where you disappeared to, and she was worried something had happened to you. Where you been for the last 5 years? Naruto just shrugged and said. Place called the institution, and from the look on your face and the scars on your skin I'm guessing you are an ex-shinobi because that's the only way you could know about it. True to his word, at the mention of the insane asylum Higashi went deadly pale before a sad look came onto his face. Nodding his head, the large smith said no more about it. After a few minutes of silence, Naruto asked if he could see the workshop. Nodding his head again, Higashi led the young boy to a door behind the counter and down a corridor past several rooms until they came to the workshop. It was a good-sized room, about 20 feet by 20 feet and a lot like the shop in front. It was dark and dusty, and again, Naruto could tell that it hadn't been used for a while. The tools were all neatly arranged on hooks on a wall, and the furnace was good. The work counter was full of old broken kunai and swords. On a wall at the back of the room were several different designs for weapons Naruto had never seen. He couldn't help but be impressed. Seeing what he was looking at, Higashi made his way over to the blonde. These were all my ideas. I had planned to make them one day, but after the Kyuubi attack, my first shop was destroyed. When it was finally rebuilt, I ended up back here and nobody even came. I found out that one of my old competitors had bribed an official on the planning council to have me put here to get rid of me, so I never had the money to move to another location or to advertise. Nodding his head, Naruto reached up and took down some of the designs. There was a double-bladed axe, a zanbato, and several more complex designs that he could just barely comprehend. Putting them down, Naruto pulled out several pieces of paper and handed them to the old smith. Curious, Higashi took the offered paper and looked over Naruto's designs. They were rough around the edges, and some of them wouldn't be possible due to the characteristics of metals, but he was impressed at the ingenuity and creativity that the designs held. Turning his gaze back to the blonde boy, Higashi asked, "You make these?" At his nod, the man grinned. Impressive. So what do you know about weapon crafting? Strong theoretical knowledge, but no practical experience to back it up. Nodding his head at Naruto's words, Higashi looked back at the designs in his hands. It shows in the designs. What would you say to me going over some of these designs with you? When we've got the bugs ironed out, I'll show you how the furnace works, and maybe we can teach you how to actually make some things sound good. Naruto just grinned and nodded in agreement. For the next few hours, Naruto and Higashi were in the workshop, leaning over the designs he had brought and the ones on the wall. It felt good for the old man to actually work again. He was always at his happiest when he was working on a new project. He had missed the feel of the paper and the satisfaction of seeing his work coming to life as he molded the metals. As the hours passed, Higashi was more and more impressed with the blonde boy. The way his mind worked allowed him to think outside the box, to think of things no one else had ever considered. That creativity partnered with Higashi's years of experience, they found that time flew by without them even noticing. Just simply bouncing ideas off each other occupied the men for a while. Higashi quickly figured out that the boy was off his rocker. There was no doubt about that, especially since he had been put into the institution. But it was that touch of insanity that made Naruto's design stand out. At one point during their time together, Higashi had made a shadow clone to make them tea. The jutsu had caught Naruto's attention, and he asked the old man what it was. After a quick explanation of the jutsu and a demonstration, they spent the next hour working on the shadow clone jutsu. It surprised Higashi that it didn't take longer for the boy to do it, but what really shocked him was that he made so many on his first try. The room was filled with clones. The amount of chakra needed to make even one clone was substantial, but from the looks of it, Naruto had just made 30 like it was nothing. Deciding to put this unexpected gift to use, Higashi had the clones go around and clean the workshop while he and the original went back to the designs. This was the sight that greeted Tenten when she came home. She had just finished a hard day of team training with her hyperactive teacher and was nearly dead on her feet. Hearing her father in the workshop surprised her at first. He hadn't set foot in there for years. So trying to be quiet, she gently pushed the door open only to see a sea of blonde-haired boys that looked about her age moving around the room cleaning. Slowly making her way into the room, Tenten found her father stood at the workbench leaning over the shoulder of another of the blonde boys. He was one of the oddest-looking boys the girl had ever seen, with his long blonde hair and black straitjacket. But for some reason she could have sworn she had seen him before. Shaking the thought out of her mind, Tenten walked over to her father and looked over his shoulder. The fact that he didn't even notice her there showed how engrossed he was in his work. He never took his eyes off the papers in front of him. Taking a better look at the papers, she realized that they were weapon designs, complex weapon designs. Without realizing it, Tenten had been leaning forward to get a better look. It was then that Tenten's father noticed her. "Oh, Tenchan, when did you get home?" "Just now. Who's this, and why aren't there so many of him? And while I think about it, why is he even in the workshop?" Tenten didn't miss the slight shine in her father's eyes when he turned to the boy at the desk that didn't even lift his head when she asked about him. "That, my dear Tenchan, is Uzumaki Naruto. You've met him before. He came to ask about using the workshop. We got to talking, and I guess we lost track of time. As for why there is so many of him, I showed him a jutsu from back in the day. He seemed to take to it quite well." When her father said she had met the boy, Tenten got confused. Sure, he seemed familiar, but she would remember someone so strange. Seeing the look on her face, Higashi laughed and tapped the blonde on the shoulder to get his attention. It was then that she finally got a good look at his face and was unable to stop the gasp that escaped her mouth. All the clones had their heads turned away as she walked in the room, so she didn't see his face until then. His face was covered in thick white bandages, similar to the ones Lee always wore on his hand. But it was his sky blue eyes and huge grin that jogged her memory of that night 5 years ago. She could feel the tears starting to run down her eyes at the thought of it. If it wasn't for the boy that had come to her rescue, she didn't want to think what would have happened. It was the words he had said to her that night after he saved her that made her want to be a kunoichi. "I might not be around next time, so you better learn to save yourself. The world is full of damsels in distress. We need more women that can look after themselves." To never be a victim again, that was her ninja way. Tears still running down her face, Tenten to herself at the still-seated blonde and pulled him into a hug. This time it didn't shock Naruto as much as when Higashi hugged him. Locking eyes with the man, Naruto raised an eyebrow. "I'm starting to see a pattern here." This just caused the older man to laugh at the blonde as he was struggling to breathe as Tenten's grip around his neck tightened. Deciding to take pity on the young boy, Higashi put his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Tenchan, I think you should let the poor lad breathe." At her father's words, Tenten released Naruto from her death grip and took a step back with a blush. "Sorry." Naruto fell to the floor and made a big show of sucking in big gulps of air before rolling around laughing at the girl's reaction, which caused her to blush even more. "Don't worry about it. Anyway, I'd better be off. I'm starting missions tomorrow. I'll be back sometime tomorrow so we can start working on my designs. Good night." At that, Naruto got up and left, leaving a blushing Tenten and a smiling Higashi behind. Over the next few weeks, Naruto had taken to going to the workshop every day after his training, and under both Higashi and Tenten's tutelage, Naruto proved to be a quick learner. It wasn't until a month into his lessons that Naruto was finally comfortable with his abilities that he attempted to combine his research of seals with his weapon designs. It wasn't long after that he had combined seals into his designs that Naruto made weapons for Shino, Hinata, and Kurenai. End flashback. Naruto shook his head for a moment before he continued. "Anyway, I brought them here because I made them for you guys. We've been a team for a while now, and I made you these to complement your fighting styles." Here he bent down and picked up the gun-like weapon and, taking on a lecturing tone that was so out of place coming from Naruto, started to explain the weapons. "This is for you, sensei. Now I know that when you cast the genjutsu you can't move from one spot without disrupting your flow of chakra. So I made you this. By channeling your chakra through the grip, you will be able to fire a magazine of specially made bullets with your chakra. It will take a lot of practice, as compressing your chakra right to get the bullets to fire is difficult, but when you master it you should be able to cast genjutsu and kill your enemies without having to rely on someone to make the finishing blow, and as a bonus this gun makes no sound when you fire it because it is condensed raw chakra." Kurenai was speechless. Naruto had made this just for her. It was perfect. He had made her the perfect weapon after only knowing her for less than 2 months. Before she could thank him, he moved on to the pipe. "Now this is for Shino, and if it works out, your family. The pipe is made from a strong metal to compensate for it being hollow, and can retract so it can't be seen. It goes on your arm under your sleeve. The idea is that you can have some of your bugs fill the pipe, and when you stab someone you can inject them into your opponent so your bugs will be able to take your enemy from the inside. I know that your clan can't fight in close combat because of your bugs, so this should help. The gift I gave your beetles should also help, but I think we will have to talk to really maximize the results on that end. Shino was deeply impressed with the weapon. He guessed that he shouldn't be surprised. It would take someone with a mind like Naruto's to come up with something as unorthodox as this. But it surprised Shino as he knew about his new beetles. He had yet to approach Naruto about the subject as he didn't see a reason to, since Shino knew he had other areas to improve in before he really had to worry about his hive's strength. Kurenai and Hinata looked at Shino for explanation, but he remained quiet and stoic. Naruto continued on, not worried about the information he had let drop. And last but certainly not least, this is for Hinata. Like the others, I made it to go with your family's fighting style. They are mostly designed for protection, but they can, in theory, enhance your gentle fist. By channeling chakra into the needle, it can give your chakra a boost. If it works like I think it will, you will be able to actually destroy or pierce someone's chakra points. This actually shocked Hinata. Her family had been trying to improve the gentle fist for years to the point that they could destroy a person's chakra points, and here was Naruto, the most insane ninja anyone had ever known, solving what her entire clan couldn't. It was then that he explained the seals. Now, as for the whole not sure of them exploding thing, the seals are your basic strengthening seals, with something of my own thrown in. Chakra channeling seals. I made them to help you channel your chakra through the metal. The only thing is I haven't tested them. This surprised Kurenai more than the weapons. She knew that he was looking into seals, but never thought he would come so far in so little time. This is great, Naruto, but why did you go to so much trouble? Naruto just looked at each of them for a moment, then said, "Why the hell not?" That marked that serious Naruto was gone and random Naruto was back. When they had gotten up after face planting, they each thanked him and asked if he had made anything for himself. His grin took on an unnerving glint, and he reached behind his back and pulled out two wicked-looking katana, hidden behind his long hair. The handles looked like they fitted his hands perfectly, and were wrapped in black leather. The blades themselves were stained a deep black that seemed like it didn't reflect any light, and the edge a deep, blood red, with jagged teeth offset to each side of the blade instead of being straight. They had the same seals as the other weapons etched into them, but they were almost impossible to see. The blades actually sent shivers down their spines just looking at them. They held a terrible beauty that left no doubt that they were made to take life and rend flesh from bone. These are my blades. No one said anything for a few minutes, the blades seeming to weigh down the area with their own killing intent. Which was promptly broken by Naruto falling over and laughing so hard it looked painful. When she saw he had finally calmed down, Kurenai spoke. Well, thank you, Naruto, these are all great, but I think Hinata and Shino should finish the water walking exercises before learning how to use them. The extra control will help, I'm sure. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto just put his blades away and ran to a tree, only to fly past them and into the water when he was blown off again. As they watched him get up and do the same thing over and over again, Shino summed up their thoughts perfectly. It's hard to tell if he is a genius or an idiot sometimes. Nodding their heads in agreement, they all turned back to the lake, their new weapons in place, and started the exercise again. Naruto's laughter echoing around the clearing as he was continually blasted off the trees. It had been a month since Team 8 had gotten their weapons, and ever since then they had been exceptionally close. Shino, Hinata and Kurenai were now more at ease with Naruto, and his odd behavior became very normal to them. It took them a while to realize that Naruto wasn't evil per se, he was just random, and took enjoyment out of lie where he could. Hinata and Shino had finished water walking in record time, wanting to start training with their new weapons as well as taijutsu and ninjutsu to a limited extent. Kurenai would have Shino and Hinata spare each other while Naruto went against herself. Kurenai discovered quickly when she first matched Naruto against Shino that her other students couldn't keep up with Naruto in a straight fight. He could move faster than most Chunin, and he hit as hard as Jonin. Thus Naruto spared with Kurenai as she was able to put Naruto under enough pressure that he actually had to try. Not to say Naruto ever seemed tried, because no matter what she had Naruto do, he was never winded. He had stamina and energy in spades. Kurenai was also helping her students develop their weapon styles. While she wasn't well versed in weapons, she was able to direct them to people that could help. Kurenai herself was starting to get the hang of her weapon, as Naruto had decided to call it the straight shooter. She still had some work to do before she would be able to use the weapon effectively, but she was getting better at handling the recoil and was starting to be able to fire the bullets using her chakra. She also had to practice quite a bit to learn how to accurately shoot the thing. Naruto didn't name the other weapon, saying that Shino and Hinata could do it themselves with their families. Speaking of which, both the Hyuga and Aburame clans had been very impressed with the weapons, so much so that they had requested for more to make so others in the clan could use them. Shino and Hinata had come to Naruto and asked him to make more, but Naruto told them that they could get the weapons from a small ninja shop owned by a man named Higashi. It turned out this was the man Naruto had made the deal for the use of his forge in exchange for Naruto's designs. Naruto had given him the designs after he made them in case this happened, as long as he got a nice 10% cut of the profits, and that he tell nobody who made them. Higashi could remake and sell them to the two clans. This even applied to the other clans as well. When Kurenai asked why he didn't want anyone to know he made them, she could have sworn he was channeling his inner Nara when he said, "Too bloody troublesome." It turns out this was more than sufficient, as the Aburame and Hyuga clans were paying us small fortunes for each weapon that they wanted. After all, seal's work is expensive due to the limited number of seal masters and the tedious work required to carve them into the metal. The Hyuga had named Hinata's weapon the Hands of Kami, as they believed their eyes were a gift from Kami herself. The Aburame had been a bit more modest and named their weapon Wasp Point. Higashi and his daughter Tenten were making so much money from Naruto's weapons they were thinking of expanding the shop. Naruto, after many times of being shot off the trees like a cannon, had finally got the hang of tree walking. He even managed to learn water walking. He was by far the most advanced in taijutsu, followed by Hinata. Kurenai also let all of them train on their own from time to time, and Naruto was seen practicing with his katana. Eventually teammates started doing missions again. Kurenai couldn't put off giving them field experience, and experience for dealing with clients. Thankfully Naruto had not done anything to the clients. Seems the word had gotten out about what Naruto does to people that cross him, and no one dared to do anything to raise the boy's ire, or they never did it to his face, or while he was working for them. Team 8 were currently stood in the Hokage office, after just returning Tora to the daimyo's wife for the 5th time. The Hokage was looking at their mission record to decide if they were ready for AC rank mission. "Well, everything seems to be in order. I see no reason not to give you one." Before he could finish, the doors to the office slammed open and Kiba stormed in, followed by the rest of Team 7 walked in. "Hey, Hokage-sama, can we please get AC rank mission now? These D ranks are driving me and Akamaru crazy." After an apology from Kakashi for Kiba's rudeness, Team 7 noticed Team 8 stood in the room staring at them. Kakashi's eye lingered on Naruto for a moment before moving to Kurenai. "Sorry, Kurenai-chan, hope we didn't disturb you." Before Kurenai could answer, she was drowned out by Naruto. "Duck ass, dog piss, Pinky, and Inu-san, how you been?" Everyone in the room sweat dropped at this, with exception to the 3 genin, who were silently steaming at the names. Kakashi was shocked a little, as Naruto had just called him by his Umbu codename. How much does he remember, and how much does he know? Thought a suspicious Kakashi. When they had calmed down, the Hokage spoke. "Well, Team 7 does have the necessary number of D ranks to take AC. So how about this? I was just about to give Team 8 here AC rank. What would you say to a joint mission?" The two senseis looked at each other for a moment before nodding. "Very well, seeing as Team 8 were here first, Kurenai will be team leader. The mission is to protect a bridge builder named Tazuna while he travels to Wave Country and until he finishes his bridge. The client will be here shortly." No sooner had he said this, an old man walked into the room on unsteady feet. He had a beard, glasses, and smelt like sake. He looked at the genin and scowled. "I pay good money for a ninja guard and you give me this? And what the hell is the mummy grinning at?" At these words 4 loud smacks were heard. Looking around the room, Team 7 saw the Hokage, Kurenai, Shino and Hinata with their hands on their faces and Naruto's grin taking on a sinister edge. The gears in his mind working as thousands of possible plans formulated in his twisted mind. Team 7 was confused, but Kakashi pressed on, not seeing any real option at the moment. "Well, let's meet up tomorrow morning at the front gate where we can check out your gear before heading out to Wave Country. I would recommend packing a long-term mission, as this mission could last more than a month." Everyone nodded before they headed out to prepare for the mission. Both Team 8 and 7 were stood at the front gates of Konohagakure, waiting for Tazuna to show up so they could leave. Both Kurenai and Kakashi had checked their team's equipment and had cleared them to go on the mission. After what Tazuna had said the day before, the Hokage had quickly dismissed them and told them when to be here to go. The two teams were keeping their distance from each other, mostly because of Naruto. Speaking of Naruto, both Kurenai and Kakashi were worried what he would do, his track record speaking for itself. They knew he wouldn't actually kill Tazuna since he promised the Hokage he wouldn't, but beyond that they didn't know. Naruto came up with the most unorthodox ways of getting people that anything he did could be a way to prank you. They didn't have to wait long. Right on time they could see Tazuna heading their way. He had the same clothes and smell as the day before, but he was able to walk in a straight line. His eyes were red and he was clearly suffering from a monster hangover. As he approached, Kurenai cast a nervous eye over to Naruto. He was just stood there, grinning at Tazuna. Not breaking his stride, the old man walked right past them and through the gate. Nodding to their teams, Kurenai and Kakashi followed after him. They were about an hour away from the village when Naruto started to walk next to the old drunk. They spoke in low voices for a moment when Naruto pulled out a small silver flask. Handing it to Tazuna, he took the lid off and had taken a swig before anyone could stop him. Giving the flask back to the boy, he stood there a moment, all eyes on him. Then his eyes went wide. He opened his mouth and they could all see smoke coming out. It was shortly after this that all the strength left his legs and he fell over. Bending down and lifting the old man onto his shoulder, laughing the whole time, Naruto started to continue heading towards Wave. Walking up to her student, Kurenai asked, "What the hell was in that flask, Naruto?" This caused Naruto to laugh louder, before answering, "Don't worry, he'll wake up in 10 minutes. I gave him my homemade hangover cure. Haha, did you see the smoke?" All the ninja present just sweat dropped at the insane boy's antics. "Naruto, if this is to get rid of his hangover, then why in the name of Kami is he unconscious? What the hell is in that stuff?" Turning around and walking backwards so he was facing them, Naruto got a thoughtful look on his face. "Well, let me think. A few herbs, some spices, wasabi, chili powder, oh, and some strange fish I found in the lake at the training grounds." They all sweat dropped again at Naruto's description of his cure. Luckily for them, they were getting used to Naruto, well, as used to him as one could get anyway. They were actually surprised when, exactly 10 minutes later, Tazuna's eyes shot open and he started to run around holding his throat. After being given water, he turned to Kurenai and said in a dry voice, "What the hell, what did the mummy give me to fucking drink?" Shaking her head, she just said, "You don't want to know." It was then that Naruto made his appearance. "So drunk, how is the head feeling?" Turning to face the boy to yell at him, Tazuna suddenly realized that his hangover was gone. Without saying anything, Tazuna started walking again, not looking at Naruto. As he passed Kakashi, they could all hear him mumbling about stupid mummies and not warning him. The group had walked the whole day, and about an hour before the sun had complete set the party brook to make camp. That night they had decided to set up camp in a small clearing about 30 feet away from the footpath. Not much had happened since Naruto had so kindly helped Tazuna with his hangover, though the old drunk had refused to say anything to Naruto since. It was shortly after they had finished setting up their tents that they noticed that Naruto didn't set one up for himself. Sakura, being the ever-curious person she was, took it upon herself to ask him where his tent was. The answer shocked them all and even got Tazuna's attention. "Don't need one. My body produces so much raw chakra that it converts any I don't use into energy. I don't actually need to sleep more than an hour or so a week if I don't use chakra." None of them knew what to say to this. To have so much chakra that you didn't need to sleep was unheard of, but what was really scary was the amount of free time that Naruto must have. "Just how much chakra do you have exactly, Naruto?" Thinking for a moment, Naruto considered how best to answer. "Well, according to the old man, about 13 times more than any Kage known to have ever lived. But I can't actually use most of it because I lack the level of control needed to use it effectively. So adjusting for the amount I waste when I cast any sort of technique, I would place my reserved at high chunin to low jonin." Even Tazuna was shocked at this. He might not be a ninja, but even he knew not to mess with a Kage. After a brief moment of silence, Sakura spoke up again due to her curiosity into what made Naruto tick. "So if you don't sleep, what do you do with all the time that most people would be sleeping?" Naruto shrugged his shoulders before looking up at the sky. "I do a lot of things, really. I tend to read anything I can get my hands on. I also have been practicing my Fuinjutsu, and I usually work on my various projects a little or train when the mood strikes me." They all sat in silence after that, staring into the smokeless fire. No one really knew how to respond after that. After a few more minutes of this, Naruto reached behind his back and pulled out his violin. Without looking at any of the others in the clearing, he started to play. The music was soft and gentle, calm, the complete opposite of the one playing it, Naruto's face taking on a serene look as he played. They sat and listened to the boy play, watching the fire as it seemed to dance in the night. They were spellbound, none could move as they listened. But as the night went on, they knew that they needed to go to sleep. One by one they all got up and went to their tents to sleep. The last one to head off to sleep being Kakashi, but before he went into his tent he pulled out a jutsu scroll and placed it next to Naruto, who was still playing with his eyes closed. This technique should help you master anything you want faster if you can figure out how to use it. Kakashi turned and went into his tent. The sound of Naruto's violin the last thing they heard as they drifted off. None of them saw the single tear that trailed down Naruto's face as he played into the night. The next day they had all woke up to the sight of Naruto, leaning over a small pile of dead rabbits that Naruto had skinned the carcasses and was in the process of cutting up the meat in pieces to be cooked over the fire. After they ate breakfast, which was a surprisingly good rabbit stew, the group packed up camp and were on their way. The atmosphere was a lot calmer today. They were spread out in a loose formation, and you could hear Sakura talking to Tazuna about Wave Country. It was then that the two Jonin noticed the puddle in the road ahead. The sight of it made Kurenai's blood boil, as it was such a poor attempt at a genjutsu that the genin should have been able to see through it. Looking at each other, the two senseis silently agreed to let the genin handle it. They didn't have to wait long. As soon as they passed the puddle, two men in brown cloaks jumped out and wrapped a battle chain around them. The genin and Tazuna turned around just in time to see their sensei fall to the ground in bloody pieces. 2 down. 6 to go. After saying this, the two ninjas started to run toward them, chain at the ready. Team 7 froze at the sight of the Jonin falling and didn't know what to do. Luckily, Team 8 did, as Kurenai had desensitized death from Shino and Hinata by having them kill baby rabbits. Naruto didn't need any pushing to kill, as Kurenai had found out when he had simple ripped the head off the rabbit he was given without blinking an eye. In fact, he had just stared at Kurenai the entire time with a neutral expression. Shino and Hinata were in front of Tazuna as soon as they saw what happened, and Naruto had moved to intercept, pulling out his katanas from on his back as he went. Before the two ninja had went 2 meters towards them, Naruto was on them and made a slash at them. The demon brothers jumped back to avoid the slash, and both Naruto and the demon brothers paused to size the other up. With his back turned to the others, they didn't see Naruto's grin turn predatory and downright evil, but the demon brothers did. In fact, it stopped them in their tracks. They had seen this grin before, and it scared them that a boy had the same grin as him. They were brought out of their thoughts by the insane giggling and words laced in killing intent. "Let's have fun, try not to die too quickly, it has been ages since I had any real fun." That was all it took to anger the brothers. Who did this kid think he was saying that he was going to beat them? Yelling in rage, the two ran straight at the boy, intending to wrap him in their chain. But before they could, a kunai pinned it to a nearby tree. As they struggled to get the chain free, Naruto turned to Sasuke, who had managed to break out of his daze. "Don't interfere with my fun. Do that again and I will rip out your precious eyes and shove them up your fucking ass until you can cough them up." None of the genin knew what to say. They had never seen Naruto like this. His grin was still in place, but his voice was hard, cold, and dripped in killing intent. But that wasn't all. When he turned to face the group, they all saw his features taking on an almost demonic look. His teeth had taken on the appearance of fangs, and his eyes had become red silted pits that had sunken back into his head. Turning back to his prey, Naruto was just in time to see them detach the chain from their gauntlets and charge at him again. What followed was one of the oddest kenjutsu battles any of them had ever seen. His grin stretching painfully large, Naruto switched the katana in his left hand to a reverse grip and disappeared in a flash to appear behind the brothers. Naruto slashed, making a small cut appear on both of them. The brothers moved to avoid Naruto, but Naruto was fast and would appear wherever they moved to deliver another cut. Every time one of the brothers got within Naruto's striking range, they would be pushed back, and before long the demon brothers were on full defense. No matter how fast the brothers seemed to move, Naruto was faster, and small cuts started to appear all over the demon brothers' bodies, and their movements started to get more and more sluggish. 10 minutes into the fight, and the demon brothers dropped to the ground, their entire bodies littered with small, paper-cut-like marks covering their bodies. Their clothes had been shredded, and they like a book had attacked them, as every cut appeared to be no more serious than a paper cut. When he saw that they couldn't fight anymore, Naruto stopped in front of them. He was a bit unsteady on his feet for a moment, but quickly got over it, put his katanas away and tied them up with ninja wire. Seeing that Naruto was finished with the enemy, the two thought-dead sensei stepped out of the woods. They explained how they had gotten away with a substitution jutsu before they turned to congratulate Naruto, only to see him positioning the brothers in a way that they were facing each other tied to trees. When they were about to ask him what he was doing, he spoke. "Now, which one of you is the brain of this partnership?" The brothers were silent, but Naruto really didn't care. He turned to the older of the two brothers. "You look like the man with the plan. So, you going to tell me why you attacked us?" The only answer he got was him spitting on the ground at Naruto's feet. Naruto's grin turned malicious, and without saying a word he turned to the other brother. When he was within arm reach, he spoke again. "I was hoping you would say that." Lifting his hand up for all to see, he made his fingers change, turning into long, thin, worm-like tentacles. Seeing what the boy was planning, Kurenai quickly cast a genjutsu on the genin and Tazuna so they went blind. But in her rush she forgot to make them deaf as well, so they could all hear the man's muffled screams as Naruto lowered his hand to his head and the tentacles made their way into his mouth, nose, and even under his skin. Kakashi and Kurenai watched in a sick fascination as they could see the man's skin start to move as the worms spread under it. Staring in horror at his older brother, the ninja could only watch as the lines moving under his skin seemed to go into a frenzy. Then, without warning, he stopped screaming and his entire body except for his head exploded in a shower of blood. Turning back to the, now terrified ninja, Naruto slowly made his way over to his other captive, grinning insanely. Alright. I'll tell you anything you want. For the next few minutes he told them everything, about Gato, Zabuza, and everything he knew that he could think of came spilling out. When he was done, Naruto took out one of his katana, walked up to him and slit his throat in such a way that it took him several minutes to die from drowning due to blood filling his lungs. When the light left his eyes, Naruto used his blade to cut off the head. When he was done, Naruto took a sealing scroll from his bag and sealed both the severed heads into it along with the gauntlets the men had worn. When Naruto was done, he stood up and started to walk back towards everyone else. The blood on his clothes seemed to melt into them, and within minutes he was clean. Before Naruto made it back to the group, he stopped at the tree that had the barbed chain pinned by a kunai. Pulling the kunai out, Naruto examined the barbed chain quickly before coiling it up and attaching it to his waist. Kurenai and Kakashi just stared at Naruto, not sure what to think. It was the first time either of them had seen Naruto's bloodline in action, and it scared them what he could do with it. Kurenai now understood what the Hokage meant when he said Anbu were scared of his methods. Kakashi was the first to recover from his shock and walked past Naruto, who was currently admiring one of the demon brothers' gauntlets, and did a quick fire jutsu to get rid of what was left of the bodies. Kurenai snapped out of her shock when Kakashi called his jutsu and waited until there was nothing left before she released her illusion. But the smell of burned flesh lingered. After that, the Jonin talked with their charges and explained what had happened, leaving out the details, keeping in very general. Then they had quick talk with Tazuna. After Tazuna pleaded for their help, they decided to continue the mission as they couldn't allow a country to be oppressed like that, and since they had 2 teams with Jonin on the mission, they felt that they were more than equipped to handle anything that could happen. For the next few hours as they continued the trek towards Wavely and before they set up camp for the night, no one said a word. Every now and then the genin would sneak glances at the blonde in the group when they thought he wasn't looking. None of the genin knew exactly what Naruto had done since the Jonin refused to tell them anything beyond general information, but they knew from the screams it was bad. Kiba could still smell the blood that clung to Naruto like a blanket. Shortly after they finished setting up camp, Naruto left by simply walking into the forest. About an hour later he came back, hair wet and with a deer slung over his shoulder, the smell of blood still strong but from the deer instead of him. They all watched quietly as Naruto sat down on a nearby rock away from the fire and started to skin and prepare the meat from the deer with a small knife he had got from his bag. Every so often throwing a scrap piece or organ into the woods to unseen animals that had been attracted by the smell of blood. It was a clear night and the moon was full, casting an eerie glow on the insane boy as he did his work, humming to himself as he went. When he finished that, he went on to stripping the bark off of several branches to cook the meat over the fire. Not being able to stand the silence anymore, Kiba spoke in a quiet voice, drawing the attention of all those present. What the hell did you do to them back there? They only had small cuts. Why did they stop fighting? Naruto, turning to face the dog-like boy, his usual grin in place, answered. Have you ever got a paper cut? Seeing the boy nod his head, he continued. They hurt, don't they? Something so small, yet they can hurt as much as a kunai to the gut. Imagine having your entire body covered in them, your face, arms, legs, torso, small cuts all over your body. What do you think would happen? It was Sasuke that answered first. It would start to slow you down, then the more cuts you get, the more pain. You can't fight if you are too focused on the pain. Turning his grin to Sasuke, Naruto nodded in approval. Exactly, and when the pain gets too much, your body stops on its own, leaving you completely vulnerable. This time it was Kakashi to ask the question. Where did you learn that? I've never heard of anyone fighting like you did. The speed was well insane as it appeared you were flashing from point to point, and the precise aim so you only broke the skin when you cut. It seems like the perfect style for capturing an opponent, while causing the most amount of pain, while at the same time it could be turned into a full-on offensive at a moment's notice, capable of quickly overpowering anyone that doesn't know how to counter the style. Naruto just nodded at the assessment of his style. Yep, sounds about right. I'm still working a few bugs out of it, But that pretty much sums it up, and I didn't learn it, I made it. I took the idea from a technique and an old style of kenjutsu. Working in conjunction, they create a truly hard-to-counter style. This didn't surprise Team 8 as much as the others. They had gotten used to Naruto, and the way he seemed brilliant one minute and like an idiot the next. Nothing more was said for a while after that. Team 7 were a bit confused at Naruto's somewhat subdued attitude. In the short time they had known him, he had never been this calm. He still let out a giggle from time to time, but other than that, nothing. While they had been talking, Naruto had put the meat on the sticks and started to cook them, the smell filling the camp. When they were done, Naruto handed them out and sat back down on the rock from earlier. When he had finished his own meat, he put the stick down and pulled out his violin again. He had just started playing when Sasuke spoke. "Can you teach me your style?" Naruto didn't stop playing, leveling his gaze on the young Uchiha. Kakashi was about to tell Sasuke that he was being rude when he was stopped by the blonde. "Sure, why not? We'll need to get you some weapons to use until I can make you something, but I don't have a problem with it. Actually, I think I have something here you can use." Putting down his violin and reaching into his bag, Naruto pulled out a scroll. Unrolling and putting his hand on one of the seals, a moment later there was a puff of smoke, and in his hands were two beautifully crafted katana. The blades were only 2 foot long, with seals carved onto their length from tip to handle. They had no guard and the handles were wrapped in a fine red silk. The sheaths were made out of wood that had been stained black. After giving them a quick inspection, Naruto threw them over to Sasuke. Catching the blades, Sasuke's eyes widened at the skill shown in the making of them. He turned back to Naruto when the boy started speaking again. "They were one of the first things I made, and it was the prototype to the katana I have now. The seals make the metal strong, and the blade shape should work for you just fine." Sasuke just stared at the weapons in his lap. Looking up at Naruto, he nodded and said just 2 words. "Thank you?" Naruto just nodded at him, then, picking up his violin, started to play again. Just like the night before, they all fell asleep to the sound of Naruto playing his violin. The next morning, after they had finished the rabbits Naruto had killed, the 2 Jonin sat the group down and explained about Zabuza. Needless to say, Naruto was the only one grinning at the end. "So you're saying he's a demon?" asked a slightly shaking Sakura. Turning to his student, Kakashi replied. "Pretty much." An air of depression started to leak out of the genin. But this didn't last long. "Potato!" This caused them all to sweat drop. Turning to Naruto, Kurenai asked, "Should I even bother to ask?" "Probably not." Shaking their heads, they returned to the conversation. "Anyway, as we were saying, when Zabuza shows himself, you all stay with Tazuna while Kurenai and I fight him. You will not engage Zabuza. If something happens to us, you run, understand?" The last part was directed at Naruto. "That's stupid." Raising his one visible eyebrow, Kakashi motioned for Naruto to continue. "If this guy is as strong as you say, then how can we outrun him if he kills both of you?" That stopped both of the older ninja in their tracks. He was right. After that, they started to plan what to do if both the Jonin failed and continued on their way to Wave. They had crossed the waterway into Wave about an hour ago, and so far everything was going fine. At least no one had tried to kill them on the way across. Naruto had taken to walking on his hands instead of his feet shortly after they got off the boat. Ever since the Demon Brothers, they had started to be a lot more formal in the way they guarded Tazuna. Currently they were set up in a circle formation around him, Kurenai and Kakashi at the back, Naruto at the front, and the others at the sides. "Naruto, I think you should walk on your feet again. We could be attacked at any minute." Pouting, Naruto did as he was told and started to walk normally. It was a few hours later when they found themselves in a thick mist that made it hard to see more than 10 foot in any direction. They knew instantly that it was Zabuza. Hinata could see the tiny particles of chakra mixed in with the mist, and Zabuza was known to be a master of the silent killing technique. All that they were waiting for Zabuza to show himself, or for him to make his move. The mist caused a big problem though. Not only did it make it hard to see, but according to Kurenai it made it almost impossible to cast her genjutsu. Something about the chakra in the air messing with it, the chakra she would use to cast. This meant that when he did make his move, Kakashi was on his own. Since Kurenai wasn't amazing at taijutsu, she could hold her own, but Kakashi and Zabuza are well above her. They continued on their way, pretending that they weren't waiting for an attack. Then Kakashi heard it, the sound of something moving through the air at high speeds. Grabbing Tazuna, he yelled, Get down! Instantly everyone hit the deck, heads down. Everyone except Naruto, who had jumped up instead of dropping to the ground. As he was coming back down instead of landing on the ground, he found himself spinning through the air on a giant sword. Naruto laughed as if he was riding a carnival ride. Eventually he stopped when it struck a tree and got stuck. That was fun! Getting off the sword, he wobbled for a moment, but before he could regain his balance, he was kicked hard in the back towards his team. Hey! That wasn't nice. Tell someone who gives a damn. Zabuza was tall as Naruto, but unlike Naruto, he was covered in muscles. He didn't wear a shirt, just gray and black cameo pants, gray arm warmers, and his slashed headband slightly tilted to one side. His voice was low and slightly muffled by the bandages that covered his face. But Naruto only saw one thing. Dude, what happened to your eyebrows? Even with the current situation, all those in the area face planted in the ground. When Zabuza picked himself up, he had a tick mark on his forehead. What the hell did you just say, you mummy? You're one to talk. The two stared at each other for a moment, and then both burst out laughing. None of the others knew what to make of it. 1 minute they were at each other's throats, and then they were laughing together. When they had both calmed down, Zabuza wiped a tear from his eye and said, You're all right, kid, for a genin. But I've got a mission to complete, so hand over the old man, and you can all walk away. No can do, no bro, I got a mission as well. Silently nodding his head at the boy, Zabuza turned to Kakashi. So are we going to do this? Or do you want to trade insults for a bit? Taking out a kunai and lifting his headband, Kakashi just stared at the missing ninja. Without saying anything else, the two met in a clash of steel, Kakashi with his kunai and Zabuza with his zanbato. It was a few minutes later that Zabuza gained the advantage, sending Kakashi into a nearby lake that none of them had seen through the mist, and trapping him in a sphere of water. He then made 20 water clones and had them charge the group. Running forward so that the real Zabuza would be in range, Kurenai sent 3 shots at Zabuza at high speed. Unfortunately, without using genjutsu, it was easy for the missing ninja to dodge the bullets and appear behind Kurenai, only to kick her onto the lake as well. Before she knew it, Kurenai was in the same predicament as Kakashi, only this time it was a clone that had her trapped. At a silent command from their creator, the clones went speeding towards the genin and bridge builder. This time, unlike with the demon brothers, none of the genin froze. Naruto and Sasuke ran to meet the clones before they could get to the others, while the other genin stayed to protect Tazuna. Pulling his katanas from his back, Naruto met the clones and started to flash from place to place. Sasuke, not having the chance to use the swords fixed to his back, chose to use a kunai in each hand. As he watched the two boys finish off his clones, Zabuza sent a curious look at the blonde. He could tell there was something different about him. If he was honest with himself, he reminded him of himself. It was this thought that made him laugh. I've got to say, I didn't think you wimps in Konohagakure had it in you. He could just hear Kakashi's reply. What are you talking about? Don't bullshit me, Kakashi. I know what it looks like when someone has had their mind broken. That kid has the same look in his eyes that I did at his age. The skills, the attitude, even the smile. You people have the makings of a true monster in that boy. He got no answer to this, which made him laugh again. But what he didn't realize was that he was so caught up in his conversation with Kakashi that he didn't see Naruto flash his way over to him and his captive. Just before one of the katana slit his stomach open, Zabuza jumped back away from the young psychopath. As soon as the jutsu was released, Kakashi sent a kunai at the clone that held Kurenai, destroying it, before he turned to resume his fight with the real Zabuza. Before the two could start again, Kurenai grabbed Naruto by the hood on the back of his straitjacket and jumped back to the group. The fight didn't last long after that. Both ninjas sent a water dragon at each other and Zabuza was sent flying into a tree. Slowly making his way to the downed Zabuza, kunai in hand, Kakashi prepared to make the finishing blow. He never got the chance. Before he could finish what he started, 3 Senbon were seen sticking out of the missing ninja's neck. His eyes widened before going blank. Putting the kunai away, Kakashi stepped to the body and checked for a pulse. When he found none, he turned his head to a random tree and said, "Thank you for the assistance, Hunter-san." Before anyone could ask who he was talking to, a masked ninja jumped out of the tree and moving towards the body. The hunter had on a sage blue battle kimono, with their long brown hair tied up in a bun. The mask was mostly blank, except for the eye holes and the Kiri sign on the forehead. Nobody noticed the grin on Naruto's face stretch wider as the hunter passed him. Nodding at Kakashi, the hunter bent down to pick up the body and, without saying a word, body flickered away. Pulling down his forehead protector to cover his eye, Kakashi turned to the group. Well done, you guys, great teamwork, and thanks Naruto, you saved my life. Now, if one of you could carry me the rest of the way to Tizuna's house, I'm going to sleep for a bit. The second Kakashi said this, he fell to the ground, unconscious. Running over and checking her fellow Jonin, Kurenai let out her breath and said to the others, It's all right, he's just suffering from chakra exhaustion. A few days and he will be fine. Before anyone could say anything, Naruto walked up and grabbed Kakashi by his feet. Before they could ask what he was doing, Naruto started to drag him the way they had been going before Zabuza attacked. When he was a few meters away, he turned back to the group. They were all just stood there, staring at him. What? What'd I do? About an hour later they arrived at Tizuna's house. Kakashi was being carried by Sasuke and Kiba, who had taken him after Naruto had wanted to drag him all the way there. They were all sat around in the living room of the house. Kakashi had been put in a spare room in Tizuna's house and he had regained consciousness a few minutes earlier. He had just finished telling them about how his eye used a lot of chakra, which was why he had chakra exhaustion when he brought up Zabuza. At least now that Zabuza is out of the picture, I doubt we will have any more ninja of his caliber to worry about. Naruto, is there a reason you're laughing like that, or is it just you again? Partway through his talk, Naruto had started to roll around on the floor, banging his hand on the floor and holding his sides as he laughed and giggled. Ha 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 ha, you actually believe ha 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 that Zabuza is dead, hee hee. This confused the others in the room. When Naruto had calmed down, Kakashi asked him what he meant. All he said was, That wasn't a hunter ninja. Both Kakashi and Kurenai's faces took on a contemplating look. Then, something clicked into place. Kurenai slapped a hand to her face and Kakashi just said, Shit. Turning to the still confused Genin, Kurenai explained. Hunter ninjas are required to remove the head and destroy the body of any missing ninja they kill at the site of death, no exceptions outside of a battlefield. Nodding his head, Kakashi continued. But the one that took Zabuza's body didn't. They took him away. We can only assume that they were working together, and the fake hunter put him into a near-death state. This means they will be back. The Genin got scared looks on their faces at his words. Naruto, if you knew about the hunter, why didn't you say anything? You were dead on your feet. Kurenai still couldn't use her genjutsu. The rest of us are Genin, and if Zabuza trusts this person to pull his ass out of trouble, they have to be good enough to be a threat. So why do you think I didn't say anything? Besides, this just gives us another shot at them where we can be better prepared for an attack. Nodding his head at the logic, Kakashi moved on. Fair enough. Now we need to discuss what we are going to do. From the injuries he gained from our fight and the stress from being put into a near-death state, Zabuza should be out of commission for about a month. Tizuna, how long will it take for you to finish your bridge? Thinking on it for a moment, the old man said. A little over a month, as long as work continues at the pace it has been going. Nodding his head, Kakashi went on. Right, which means we are almost guaranteed to run into him again. We have a month. It's not much, but it's something. Nodding her head, Kurenai spoke. From now until then, we will be taking shifts. 2 of you will be training with me and Kakashi, 2 will be guarding Tizuna, and the other 2 will be guarding Tizuna's family. We can switch every 2 days. They all nodded their heads at this. Potato. Again they all stared at Naruto, who just shrugged. Shaking his head at the strange blonde, Tizuna said. I just want to thank you for all you're doing for us. If it wasn't for you, I would never have made it this far. Don't worry about it, you old drunk. If we didn't help you, then we wouldn't be any better than Gato. Everyone in the room nodded at this, agreeing with the crazy Genin. They were all sat around a table in Tizuna's house with his daughter Tsunami and her son Inari. Tsunami was a beautiful young woman in her late 20s with shoulder-length black hair and a gentle smile. She had an amazing figure for a civilian and was very welcoming to the guests in her home. Inari, on the other hand, had an air of defeat surrounding him. He had a plain white shirt underneath a set of green overalls. His brown hair was covered by a white hat, and his skin was very pale. Obviously, he didn't spend much time outside. He also gave all the ninja the cold shoulder. No one said anything as they ate the small meal. They felt a little bad that they were eating so much of the family's food when they had so little. As soon as he finished, Inari ran upstairs to his room without saying a word to his mother. Turning to the ninja, Tsunami apologized to them all. Sorry about him, he was never able to get over Kaisa's death. Seeing the questioning looks on their faces, Tizuna explained about how Kaisa had opposed Gato and had been publicly executed. Kaiza was also really close to Inari, and Inari saw him as his surrogate father. It was a sad story, and it got to all of them, even if they didn't all show it. After a few minutes of silence, Naruto stood up and went to the front door. Seeing he was going, Kurenai asked, "Naruto, where are you going?" He didn't turn to face them, just looked over his shoulder with his usual grin on his face. The roof. Without saying anything else, he left. Those left in the room said nothing. Then they heard it, Naruto's violin. Like all the other times they heard him play, it was a soft, sad melody. Tsunami was shocked, this being the first time she had heard the young boy play. It was a beautiful sound and very well played, but it didn't seem right to her for someone that hadn't stopped smiling since he had got there to play a song that held such sadness and pain. Why does he play such sad music? He seems like such a happy boy. All the other people in the room stared at her for a moment before Kiba said, "Happy? He's fucking insane." They all nodded their heads in agreement at this, which caused Tsunami to frown. That's not a nice thing to say about someone. Shino took it upon himself to explain what they meant, as it appeared Kiba's came off more as an insult than a fact. "I'm sorry, Miss Tsunami, but I think you misunderstood. We weren't insulting him. He is actually insane. He spent the last 6 years of his life in a mental institution built to house insane ninja. He was released a few months ago to become a ninja." Both Tsunami and Tazuna were shocked to hear this. But it was Tazuna that asked the next question. "If he is insane, then why the hell is he a ninja? Isn't that, I don't know, unsafe?" Both Jonin shared a look before Kurenai said, "There are certain things that we are not at liberty to saying. I'm afraid this is one of them. But let's just say Naruto isn't a threat to his allies, but I would hate to be his enemy." With that said, they all just sat there for a while listening to Naruto playing. Naruto continued to play well into the night, and he was still playing when they all went to bed. The next morning when they woke, they were all surprised at what they found Naruto doing in the kitchen with Tsunami. Like when they had been traveling, Naruto had been hunting while they slept, but whereas before he had caught a few rabbits and a deer, last night he had caught what seemed like the entire forest that surrounded the area. The room was full of dead rabbits, about 20 different birds and 5 deer. The two were in the middle of skinning and plucking the carcasses and cutting up the meat. None of them knew what to make of it. They all just assumed that when they got here he would stop hunting. When he saw them all just stood there staring, his grin grew. "What?" Stepping forward, Kurenai explained their confusion. "Naruto, why did you go hunting? I could understand when we were traveling, but why now?" He just started laughing. "Ha ha ha! Gato has a stronghold on the whole island and controls what supplies get onto the island due to his shipping company. Tsunami here hasn't been able to shop for decent food for a while, and now that we are all here she didn't have enough food. So I went hunting to compensate for us staying here." Again, none of them knew what to say to this. It had never occurred to them that Tsunami couldn't shop for food. Tazuna was nearly in tears at what the blonde had done. For the next hour they all sat and helped, except Kakashi and Inari. While they were doing this, Kurenai thought about the plan. She realized it was not a good idea to leave any of the genin unsupervised. So as they were working, she told them all her changes. They would still be in teams of 2, but she would go to the bridge with Tazuna's guard, while Kakashi would supervise the training. The other thing was that Kakashi would need to stay within hearing distance of the house in case anything happened. They all agreed, and the Jonin told them the teams for the foreseeable future, and what they would do first. Kiba with Shino would be the first to guard the bridge with Kurenai, Sakura and Hinata would be the first to train with Kakashi, and Sasuke along with Naruto would look after Tsunami and Inari. About an hour before they set off for their respective assignments, Tsunami asked if it was okay for her to go into the village to try and find any vegetables that she might be able to buy. After considering it for a moment, Kurenai agreed that Naruto could go while Sasuke stayed to watch the house and Inari. This did not sit well with the Uchiha, but he just nodded his head and agreed. An hour later, Tazuna and his guard for the next 2 days set off for the bridge, while Kakashi took Sakura and Hinata just inside the woods for their training. The 3 stayed in the kitchen to finish as Inari sulked in a corner of the room. When they were done with the animals, Naruto took all the organs that they couldn't use outside and dumped them in a circle around the house. Watching him, Tsunami asked what he was doing. "Feeding my friends. I met a small pack of wolves when I was hunting and made a deal. I spread out some food for them and they will help guard the house. Nice bunch. After they tried to kill me, they were very sorry. Hee hee." "You can talk to wolves? Wait, did you say they tried to kill you?" "I can communicate with most animals. With my bloodline to change my body, all I have to do is alter my vocal cords and a few parts of my brain. Simple. What's a bloodline? Something that only I can do thanks to a genetic trait. And the trying to kill you part. Naruto just shrugged and started doing backflips until he hit a tree. Ow. Giggling as he stood up, Naruto went back into the house. See what we meant last night when we said he was insane? Looking behind her, Tsunami saw Sasuke a few paces away. Not saying anything, she turned to head back to the house with a worried look on her face. Naruto and Tsunami were walking down the road towards the village. They hadn't really talked much since the whole wolf conversation. She just didn't know what to say to the young boy. Over the last few years she had seen a lot of things, like men and women killing themselves and their families just so they wouldn't suffer. Or on the rare occasions that Gato and his men returned one of the women they took, and they came back as empty shells. But Naruto was different. He had this aura around him. At first she had mistaken it for happiness, but after she talked to the other ninjas she realized that it was his insanity. Whatever made him like this, it was so bad that you could practically see it. It made her sad to look at him. He seemed like such a nice boy, a little okay, a lot strange, but still nice. He was walking a little way in front of her, hands folded behind his head. A few minutes later they were entering the town. A lot of people had lost their homes over the last few years because of Gato. Many of the houses were falling apart, or in some cases already fell down. The streets were full of people, both young and old, and if you looked carefully you could see some of them were dead. Tsunami tried not to look around at the people lying in the street. Naruto, on the other hand, looked at everything with a smile on his face. After wandering around for a while, they finally found a stand that had some only slightly out-of-date products. It was then that Naruto said something that shocked her. This reminds me of when I was little, rotten food at high prices, the smell of hopelessness in the air, or that might actually be that guy over there. I think he's starting to go out of date too. Tsunami didn't know what to say to this. Konohagakure was supposed to be the nicest and wealthiest place to live in all of the elemental nations. How could this remind him of his childhood? Before she could ask him what he meant, Naruto had walked away. It was on their way out of the village that Naruto noticed a building that stood out from the rest. Unlike those around it, this building was not in disrepair, and the general populace seemed to be avoiding it. The building wasn't very good to look at, seeing as it was basically a giant box and lacked any sort of creative flair, but it was in one piece, had a fairly new paint job and a front door, which was more than could be said for most of the buildings around it. Hey, Tsunami-san, what's in there? Following his line of sight, her face took on a mixture of hatred and fear. That's one of Gato's buildings. He made it for his thugs. It's where they take the women they find in the village that they take a shine to, and... She didn't finish, she didn't need to. Then she saw a strange look on Naruto's face. It was like he was struggling to keep his grin. Without saying anything, he started towards the building with a slow walk, leaving her where she stood as the people around then all watching on silently as he crossed the street towards the building. When he came to the door, Naruto picked up his left foot and slammed it into the closed door, which flew off its hinges, and walked inside. The inside was nothing but a big room with sofas and beds. To one side of the room there were several women chained naked to a wall of all ages. The oldest looked to be in her late 30s, and the youngest being around his own age. Even though it was the middle of the day, the room was full of men that were probably in Gato's employment, about 50, all with a woman. The air reeked of sex, fear, alcohol, and cigar smoke. It was almost enough to make the young boy gag if he hadn't smelled far worse. After the thugs got over their shock, they started to get up and surround Naruto. When they had him covered on all sides, a very large, very fat man stepped forward. "You've got a death wish or something?" His words were slightly slurred. He was obviously drunk. It was then that the thugs saw something that hadn't been seen in years. Naruto stopped grinning. His insane grin slipped into a cold stone poker face that kept what he was feeling hidden. The air in the room seemed to get colder, and all the thugs took a step back. He didn't say anything, just stood there, looking around the room with cold, calculating eyes. When nothing happened, the thugs started to get their confidence back. The fat man from before walked up to Naruto, but because of the young boy's height, he was only a few inches taller than the boy. "Maybe you didn't hear me. I said you've got a death wish." He never finished. As soon as the man had gotten close, Naruto had thrust his hand forward and through the man's stomach. He was still alive, but in a lot of pain. All the thugs in the room were shocked. Leaning forwards, Naruto put his mouth next to the man's ear and said loud enough for all of them to hear. You have no idea. Without saying another word, Naruto gave a sharp pull and ripped out a long white object from the man's body. The man gave one last shuddering breath, and then fell over. In Naruto's hand for all to see was what was left of the man's spine, and yet Naruto didn't show any reaction. His face stayed impassive the whole time, until he dropped it. It was like someone had thrown a switch in his head. Slowly a smile grew in his face, and then it turned into a grin. They could hear the giggles in his throat as they became full-blown laughter. Then he started to change. Outside a small crowd had gathered, but they couldn't see inside because none of them dared to get closer. Tsunami! Turning around to see who called her, Tsunami saw her father running to her side, Kurenai, Kiba and Shino right behind. Dad! What the hell's going on? One of the villagers came to the bridge screaming about something happening. It's Naruto. I don't know what happened. 1 minute he was here and then he was kicking the door down. At the mention of Naruto, Kurenai pushed Tazuna out of the way and grabbed Tsunami by the shoulders, her eyes wide. What is in that building? With a shaking voice, Tsunami told her what she told Naruto. Kurenai's eyes widened even more in understanding. Then they heard the laughter, followed by the screams of terror. Shit!